Chapter 51. Let's talk about Luo Lin's hobbies. There are three main ones. First time, eating delicious food. The second is to play poker. The third is to take a bath. If calculated in order, delicious food comes first, bathing comes second, and playing cards comes third. You can see how important bathing is to him. He is a committed bathtub partier. For Rolin, life without a bathtub is boring. Especially the jacuzzi is his favorite. This was almost the thing he was most dissatisfied with about Hogwarts, because his dormitory at Hogwarts didn't have a fish tank. But it is not difficult for him. He always has a bathtub in his storage space. Whenever you go to a new place, just connect the water and you can enjoy the joy of bathtub. At this time, I heard Harry agree with the jacuzzi. Luo Lin seemed to have found a like-minded person. No matter how pleasing it is to Harry, Luo Lin couldn't help but sigh. He is worthy of being the protagonist. He is so lovable. Harry actually still didn't understand why Luo Lin was so excited, but he had already seen Rolin's love for the jacuzzi. In addition, he also liked the jacuzzi very much, so he couldn't help but nod it. The professor is right. The jacuzzi is indeed a good thing. Well, that's very good. If you keep this idea, you won't regret it in the future. Luo Lin looked like a coward and then he hesitated and said, "When you get to Hogwarts, there is a high probability that there will be no comfortable bathtub to use. But you can come to me when the time comes. I have a spare bathtub here." Harry was a little confused and didn't understand why there was no bathtub in Hogwarts, but Rowling had a spare bathtub. But he still expressed his gratitude. "Thank you very much, Professor." "You're welcome. Who made us all like the jacuzzi?" Luo Lin smiled and said, "But now is not the time to discuss the jacuzzi. We should go have dinner." When it comes to eating, Harry immediately felt his stomach growl. He suddenly realized that he had not eaten for a long time. The few potato chips Uncle Vernon gave me didn't even fill my stomach. On the contrary, it will make him feel hungrier. But just now I was completely immersed in the fun of taking a bath, so I didn't pay much attention to it. Now that I suddenly mentioned it, my stomach immediately started to protest. Luo Lin also heard Harry's stomach growling. He didn't say anything, but silently quickened his pace. Harry followed Rolin. The two quickly arrived at the dining place. Advertisement: wait until the two of them sit down. The dishes started to be served. Haggis soup, barbecue, thin pizza, yogurt salad, baklava. As soon as I saw these foods, Luo Lin knew that his previous speculation was correct. The chef employed in the hotel is indeed a Turkish chef, and there is a high probability that they are all Turkish chefs. This dinner is obviously a very Turkish dinner, especially the Turkish kebab and Turkish thin pizza. As a foodie, Luo Lin had eaten Turkish cuisine several times before, and he recognized the food on the table at a glance. Harry did no meat and vegetables, but it was really difficult for him to distinguish what kind of cuisine it was, and he had never had such a sumptuous dinner. There is everything from cold dishes to main dishes to desserts. Both quantity and quality are amazing. Saw the food on the table. Harry felt hungrier, but he was still very polite and looked at Luo Lin, waiting for him to eat first. Luo Lin saw what he was thinking, so he naturally picked up a piece of Turkish thin pizza and took a bite. "Well, Xian, the taste is quite good, authentic Turkish flavor. The minced meat goes well with the vegetables on top, and it's very satisfying to bite into it." See Luo Lin start eating. Harry finally started. He picked up the plate in front of him, put some barbecue on it, and took some bread and half a lemon. Turkish kebab is served with bread and lemon. It was obviously Harry's first time eating Turkish kebab, but he didn't know how to eat it by himself. Luo Lin had already eaten a piece of Turkish thin pizza. Seeing Harry's actions, Luo Lin nodded secretly. It seems that Harry also has the potential to be developed into a foodie. Then he paid less attention to Harry. "Start tasting the food on the table." Luo Lin asked the hotel to prepare double portions, so the two of them share one portion each, so they don't interfere with each other's eating. And it can be seen that the hotel is very considerate. The portion prepared for Harry was smaller. The yogurt salad is very appetizing. Advertisement: the lamb offal soup has a strong lamb flavor. The final dessert, baklava, gave Rolin the highest praise for desserts. Not sweet. The Turkish chef in this hotel is very good at cooking. It can be said to be the most delicious food Luo Lin has eaten in London except that Chinese restaurant. It can even be said that if it weren't for Luo Lin's preference for Chinese food, Turkish food might be more in line with other people's tastes. Certainly, the Chinese restaurant in London is certainly not a top-notch Chinese restaurant in China. Luo Lin's little wish has always been to visit the big eastern country in a few years and taste the delicious food. Maybe he can try the challenge of eating the delicacies of the great eastern country, but there is a high probability that he will get lost in a certain area for a long time. Come to your senses. He had swallowed the last bite of baklava. Luo Lin patted his belly with satisfaction and turned to look at Harry beside him. Harry was almost finished eating at this time. In fact, although the portion prepared by the hotel for him was smaller than that of Luo Lin, it was not too small for a child. But Harry was really hungry. He actually ate almost all of it. He even drank a lot of haggis soup, and he finished all the haggis in it. Luo Lin also didn't know if the British had any taboos about internal organs. But judging from Harry's situation, he has no such taboo. The only food left on Harry's table at this point was 3 pieces of baklava. He looked longingly at the seal on the table, with some longing in his eyes. But he really couldn't eat anymore. Just when he was in trouble, Luo Lin spoke. If you can't finish eating, pack it up so you can have it as breakfast when you get up in the morning. Harry's eyes lit up. That's right. He only thought about not wasting it after eating it now, and completely forgot that it could be packed, so it would not be wasted at all. What a troublesome professor. Harry felt embarrassed again. Luo Lin didn't pay attention and asked the hotel waiter to find Harry a paper bag to pack. The two returned to their place of residence. Rowling told Harry to go to bed early, and they would go shopping in Diagon Alley during the day. Then Luo Lin went to bed first. Harry was still very energetic. Today he experienced something that he had never experienced in the previous 10 years. Whether it's a jacuzzi, those are the most delicious foods. Harry couldn't stop thinking about it. But he didn't want to get up late tomorrow and leave a bad impression on the professor. Lie on the soft and comfortable bed. Harry closed his eyes and forced himself to sleep. Advertisement. Chapter 52. The next morning, Harry woke up from his sleep, stretched hard. Then he slowly got out of bed. He really couldn't bear to part with this soft and comfortable bed, mainly because I have never slept in such a comfortable bed. Last night could be said to be the most comfortable night's sleep in his memory. Looking at the big white bed, Harry was stunned for a moment. I really want to live such a wonderful life. But he soon adjusted his mood. He is going to study at a magic school. When he becomes a wizard like Professor Rasma, he will definitely be able to live such a wonderful life. Then he wouldn't have to go back to the privet drive home and suffer the abuse from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. Harry opened the door and prepared to go find Lorraine. But standing in front of Luo Lin's door, he didn't dare to knock on the door, for fear that Luo Lin was still sleeping. Fortunately, he soon heard the sound inside. Master, get up. That was Miss Black's voice. Miss Black's voice is really beautiful, 100 times better than Aunt Petunia's. Aha, Luo Lin yawned and sat on the bed, waiting for Black and Longbottom to bring his clothes and shoes. After getting dressed, he heard a knock on the door. Professor. Harry woke up so early. Luo Lin was a little surprised. It's just past 9 now. The two of them didn't separate until after 2 o'clock yesterday, which meant that Harry didn't go to bed until nearly 3 o'clock at the earliest. Woke up after 6 hours of sleep? He can get up so early. It's because there is undead magic that can put him into a deep sleep and quickly replenish his energy. It's just that he doesn't use it very often. Today I plan to get up early and try the breakfast in the hotel. Unexpectedly, when he got up, Harry also got up. He opened the door and came to the door. Mr. Potter, no, I feel uncomfortable being called that way. Can I call you Harry from now on? As a Xia native, it's really awkward to call a child Mr. or Professor. Certainly. Harry seemed a little happy to be called by his first name. This was a sign of the close relationship between the two parties. It showed that the professor had a good impression of him. How could he not be willing? Advertisement. Well, Harry, you're lucky. I thought you would sleep a little longer. We can go and taste the hotel's breakfast today, Luo Lin said with a smile. Harry nodded, feeling much more relaxed than last night, although he only slept for 6 hours. But these 6 hours were the best 6 hours of sleep he had ever had. He is full of energy now and does not feel tired at all. When I heard that I was going to have breakfast, I couldn't help but rub my belly. Tell the truth. After eating so much last night, he is not so hungry now. Luo Lin took Harry to the dining place. The hotel's breakfast is a buffet. Limited supply of bread, cheese, vegetables, sausages, fruits, eggs, and of course milk and Turkish black tea. Luo Lin looked at it. I found that the sausage was obviously Turkish sausage, very distinctive. As for other food, it didn't appeal to him. So he got some sausages and a cup of black tea. Harry wasn't very hungry. He took some vegetables, an egg, and a sausage, and also followed Luo Lin's example and ordered a cup of black tea. Compared to dinner, breakfast was decidedly more boring. The sausage tasted pretty good though. Luo Lin ate 3 sausages, 2 slices of bread, and drank 2 cups of black tea. The black tea suits his taste quite well. It has a strong aroma and a good taste, with a slight bitterness and a sweet aftertaste. It is somewhat similar to the tea from Xia Kingdom. Unlike the black tea in some places, milk and sugar are added, which completely destroys the flavor of the black tea itself. That's right. It's you, Britain. And it's not just the UK. As far as Luo Lin knows, most Western countries add sugar or honey to black tea. In short, they drink sweet black tea. As a black tea fundamentalist, Rolin strongly condemned their behavior and regarded their behavior as heresy. Certainly, this is all a joke. Everyone has their own taste. As long as he doesn't disturb others, he can drink whatever he likes. A cup of black tea. Harry felt warm all over. Now it's sunny after the rain. There is sunshine outside. Harry couldn't help but think back to the dark cabin last night. Advertisement for a moment. I felt like I was in another world. I wonder if Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia are still in the cabin? After breakfast, Luo Lin did not stop. He took Harry to the leaky cauldron not far away. When we came to the street where the leaky cauldron was located, Harry looked around curiously. The surrounding area is no different from an ordinary street. So where are the shops for buying magic items? Until Rowling brought Harry to the leaky cauldron. The leaky cauldron. This is a very special place. You should feel it, right? Luo Lin asked with a smile. Harry nodded. Regarding this small bar, if it weren't for Luo Lin, he really wouldn't have paid attention. But when Luo Lin stopped here, he had noticed that no one around him was looking here at all. Those people's eyes only fell on the shops on both sides of the leaky cauldron, and it seemed that they couldn't see the leaky cauldron at all. We're going to enter from here, and then go to the street of the Wizarding World, Diagon Alley, Rolin explained. Diagon Alley? Harry read it in his mouth, and then followed Rolin into the leaky cauldron. The leaky cauldron is small, dirty, and a bit shabby. If it weren't for what Luo Lin said, Harry would never believe that this place had anything to do with the Wizarding World. But after walking in, he was sure that this was the magical world. A few old witches, a man in a top hat, and a bald boss all don't look like people from the normal world. Harry looked at the others. Others naturally looked at Luo Lin and Harry. Of course, the first thing everyone noticed was Luo Lin. Luo Lin, you are here. Old Tom walked over from behind the counter enthusiastically and abandoned the man who was chatting with him just now. This made the polite little man look a little aggrieved. But he came over quickly. Professor Rasma, hello. My name is Digu. Hello, Mr. Digu. Luo Lin shook hands with him. Digu seemed a little excited. He took off his courtesy and bowed. Professor, you are completely different from the legend. They never describe you as such a polite gentleman. Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. Luo Lin was about to say something. Suddenly Harry on the side stared at Digu, who took off his top hat. It was you? It was you who bowed to me that time in the store. Digu was a little confused at first, but when he looked up and saw Harry, he was stunned. He asked with a trembling voice, It's you, Mr. Harry Potter. Advertisement. Chapter 53. Digu recognized Harry and called out Harry Potter's name. All of a sudden, the entire leaky cauldron fell silent. The next moment, Old Tom stared at Harry with his eyes wide open. He didn't even care about Rolin and passed directly past Rolin and came to Harry. Mr. Potter, welcome back, welcome back. Other people in the leaky cauldron also stood up and came to Harry's side. Luo Lin was squeezed away at once, a little confused. Mr. Potter, it's such an honor to finally meet you. It's unbelievable that I can see you here. It's so exciting. I actually shook hands with Mr. Potter, and my feelings are simply indescribable. Luo Lin turned his head. I found that people in the leaky cauldron lined up to shake Harry's hand. Until now, only then did he truly feel the huge influence of the name Harry Potter in Wizarding society. This spectacular scene cannot be described in a few words. After most of the people shook hands, Luo Lin squeezed in again. Prepare to leave with Harry. Right now, a pale young man came over. His expression was very nervous, and one eye kept twitching. He also wears a purple scarf on his head. See this man. Luo Lin was not surprised. Or maybe he would be surprised if Professor Quirrell didn't come today. Voldemort still brought Professor Quirrell to grab the Sorcerer's Stone at this time. Thinking of the magic stone in his storage space, Rolin couldn't help but feel sorry for Professor Quirrell. This is an action destined to fail. Poor Professor Quirrell. But I thought about what if Professor Quirrell knew about the magic stone he took away. Luo Lin found it interesting again. Professor Quirrell or Voldemort will definitely feel very uncomfortable then. After all, the Philosopher's Stone was once so close to him. But since it is in the storage space, it is theoretically infinite. Advertisement: the farthest distance in the world is that you are by my side, but I can't see you. The current situation is like that. Rowling stood next to Harry, waiting for Professor Quirrell to come over and say hello. What surprised Rolin? Quirrell didn't greet Harry at the first moment, but greeted him first. Hello. Nice to meet you, Professor Rasma. Professor Quirrell stammered. Who are you? Luo Lin pretended not to know Professor Quirrell. After all, he had never had formal contact with Professor Quirrell. At the same time, Luo Lin did not want Professor Quirrell to know that he had paid attention to him. I am Quirrell, a staff member at Hogwarts. It turns out to be Professor Quirrell. Luo Lin looked stunned. I've heard of you and I'm glad to see you. You are here to take Mr. Harry Potter shopping, right? I'm also going to buy a new book about vampires. Quirrell's words were very unfluent, and his expression looked extremely strange. Luo Lin didn't pay attention to his weirdness, but nodded naturally. Yes, I'm just about to take Harry to buy the things he needs. Then can I shake Harry Potter's hand? Quirrell asked suddenly. Luo Lin was stunned for a moment and shook his head. This is not something I can decide. You should ask Harry himself. This is his right. Professor Quirrell nodded, turned around and came to Harry. Bobot, I feel indescribably happy to see you. He took Harry's hand directly. This made Harry very uncomfortable. You are? I am a staff member of Hogwarts. You will see me in school from now on, Quirrell said with a strange expression. I heard he was also a faculty member. Harry felt relieved a little. Hello, Mr. Quirrell. However, noticing that Quirrell was a bit nervous, Harry suddenly felt a little panicked. He turned to Luo Lin for help. Luo Lin shrugged and walked over. Okay, Harry, it's time for us to go and say goodbye to Professor Quirrell. Harry breathed a sigh of relief and waved his hand quickly. Goodbye, Professor Quirrell. Quirrell didn't say anything and just stared at Harry. Harry couldn't stand it anymore and trotted out of the crowd. Everyone, please stop following us. We still have a lot of things to buy. Rowling raised his voice and asked Longbottom to stand in front of Harry. Advertisement: looking at the bone cat in the ground. Even if the threat doesn't seem big, many wizards still can't help but take a step back. Only then did they remember that Rowling was not only a professor at Hogwarts, but also a necromancer. Thinking of all the rumors about the necromancer. There is also Rolin's experience of escaping from prison several times. They thought it would be better for them to just stand there obediently. Taking this opportunity, Luo Lin took Harry through the bar and came to the patio. Professor Quirrell had always had his eyes on Harry, but after Longbottom appeared, his eyes were completely and involuntarily focused on Longbottom's skeletal body, until Longbottom also ran to the bar. He reluctantly withdrew his gaze, and a black light flashed in his eyes. Rowling called Longbottom back. During this period, Harry was still frightened. Professor, what happened to Professor Quirrell just now? Why is he a little nervous? I just entered Hogwarts not long ago, so I don't know him very well, but I have heard rumors about him. He has become like this since he returned from his travels, Rolin explained. Back from traveling? Harry was a little curious. Wasn't he like this before? I heard that yes, he was very good at reading, but he wanted to gain practical experience, so he went out to travel. It is said that he met a vampire and an old witch in a certain forest, which turned him into a completely different person. That's what you see. I'm afraid of anyone, including you students. Hearing Luo Lin's words, Harry became even more confused. Why can he still be a professor when he is even afraid of students? What is he teaching in school? Luo Lin raised his eyebrows. So he has no subjects to teach now. Dumbledore wants him to rest for a year, and then start working again depending on the situation. Originally, he was going to teach the Defense Against Dark Arts course. Defense Against the Dark Arts? What a familiar name. Harry was startled for a moment, then realized, isn't this the course you want to teach, Professor? Luo Lin nodded. That's right. Harry's expression suddenly became strange. It turns out that the professor took Professor Quirrell's position, but it doesn't seem to be called robbing. It should be that Professor Quirrell is not worthy of the role, and Professor Rasma is the one who is expected to return. Otherwise, why would Dumbledore invite Professor Rasma to teach? Harry immediately found a reason in his mind for Rolin to replace Professor Quirrell. Okay, it's time for us to go to Diagon Alley. Look at Harry, count 3 bricks upward from here, then count 2 bricks horizontally, and just hit this brick. While Luo Lin was speaking, Blake's figure appeared and pecked the brick 3 times with her bony beak. After the wall trembled, the archway appeared. Advertisement. Chapter 54. Harry watched this magical scene intently. Rolin takes Harry into Diagon Alley. This matter is already familiar to Luo Lin. but he is different from other young wizards from Muggle families. Harry didn't need to exchange pounds for money. All he had to do was withdraw money from the treasury left to him by his parents. That was the savings of generations of the Potter family. The amount of money inside was enough to make Luo Lin drool with envy. Arrive at the entrance of Gringotts. Luo Lin looked at Harry and said with a smile, "Harry, you will soon know how rich you are." Harry was looking carefully at the majestic white marble building of Gringotts. Hear what Luo Lin said. Somewhat caught off guard. Soon? But a little excited. Is he really rich? With this excitement, Harry followed Luo Lin and walked into Gringotts. Luo Lin came to the counter with ease. "Good morning, Professor Rasma." The goblin took the initiative to greet him. "Good morning. I'm going to get some money from Harry Potter's vault," Luo Lin said directly. The goblin glanced at Harry Potter next to him and didn't pay much attention. "Do you have his key, Professor?" "Certainly." Luo Lin turned over his hand, and a small golden key appeared in his palm. "Is it this key?" The goblin took the key from his hand, picked it up and looked at it carefully, then nodded. "There should be no problem. Then how about Griphook take you to the underground vault?" "Can't." Luo Lin didn't care at all who took him to the underground vault, as long as there was someone there. Harry remained silent and stood quietly aside. Leave everything to Luo Lin. He is now at ease. "Griphook," the goblin behind the counter shouted, and Griphook ran over. "Professor, let's go." Still go through the gate, pass through the narrow stone corridor, and get on the trolley. The cart turned around and round, and finally stopped in front of a small door. No need to go to the 713 vault this time. The speed is still much faster. Harry was very curious all the way. After arriving at your destination, advertisement, 2 people and a goblin got off the cart. The 2 people pulled the ring back, and then used the small golden key to unlock the door. A thick green smoke came out. It's obviously highly poisonous. Luo Lin looked at this protective measure with interest. Compared with the protective measures of the 713 vault, this protective measure is much simpler. The Sorcerer's Stone is obviously not as precious as the Potter family's treasury. After all, one is a hen that continuously lays golden eggs, and the other is just a golden egg. Wait until the green smoke at the door clears. The 2 saw the scene in the vault. Harry gasped immediately. There are a lot of gold coins, a lot of silver bars, and countless piles of bronze gnats in the vault. After Luo Lin's popular science, Harry already knew the approximate value of galleons, sickles, and gnats, even converted into Muggle currency. That's also a pretty huge number. Harry never imagined that he could have so much money. "Are these all mine?" Harry looked at Rolling aside in disbelief. Luo Lin nodded at him. "Of course, this is all yours." Luo Lin looks calm and relaxed on the surface. "But I was extremely envious in my heart. It's really irritating to see people compare to each other. He worked hard. I guess the galleons earned in a lifetime will not be as much as the amount in the treasury. Harry already had so much wealth after he was born. I'm so lucky. But envy is envy." Luo Lin also knew that Harry had suffered so much, and all the wealth was left to him by his family, and he deserved it. It doesn't rise to the level of jealousy. Just seeing so much money. Luo Lin also felt an impulse in his heart. He wants to open up a special money storage space as big as a vault in the storage space. Then fill up your savings space. As a salty fish, Luo Lin finally has a goal now. I just don't know whether it is a short-term goal or a mid to long-term goal. Rolin hopes this is a short-term goal, because if he had so much money, he can really retire. Then you don't have to go to work, you can quietly work as a necromancer. It's a joy to think about. Advertisement, but to make that much money, there is still some difficulty. Apart from robbing Gringotts, Luo Lin could not think of a way to make a lot of money quickly in a short period of time. It's a pity that the wizarding world doesn't need much cheap labor. Otherwise, his undead army will appear. Who can compete with him? Just moving bricks can kill other people. Luo Lin thought with some regret. Harry didn't know what Rowling was thinking. He was stunned now and couldn't think in his head. Look at so much money. The first people that came to his mind were Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If they knew, you will definitely keep all the money for yourself, right? After all, they always complained that adopting Harry would cost a lot of money. Harry couldn't help but think. But soon he forgot about the Dursleys and turned to look at Luo Lin. "Professor, do you need the money? If necessary, you can take it as you like." Harry recalled his previous thoughts and said sincerely. Luo Lin shook his head when he heard this. "No, I am a professor. I am paid, and I am also an employee of the Ministry of Magic. I get a double salary, so I am not short of money." Speaking of which, Luo Lin was indeed envious of Harry for having so much money. but let him take Harry's money. He really couldn't do such a thing. It's such a shame. But there was still food in the hotel last night. Harry couldn't help but speak. Luo Lin understood what he meant, and Harry wanted to repay him. After thinking for a while, Luo Lin took out 20 gold coins from the pile of gold coins. The money you paid for your hotel stay and meals yesterday was about 100 pounds. According to the exchange rate of 5 to 1, can I get 20 gold coins? Sure. Harry seemed very happy to be able to repay Luo Lin. You can also take more, I don't mind. Ha ha ha, there is no need. If I am really short of money in the future, I can borrow it from you. Luo Lin felt that Harry did have a pure heart. This kind of innocence is rare. No wonder he can become the protagonist of the current world, and then he can have quite good charisma. Harry nodded heavily and said very seriously, Professor, whenever you need the money, just tell me. Good. Rowling agreed, and Harry was in a pretty good mood. Then he was a little embarrassed. Professor, how many gold coins should I get? Well, take 100 gold coins, and some silver coins and copper coins. It will definitely last for a year. Rolin gave advice. Harry was also very obedient, and filled the bag Luo Lin handed him with 100 gold coins, dozens of silver coins and copper coins. Advertisement. Chapter 55. Withdraw the money. Luo Lin took Harry and left. Take a stroller. The two left Gringotts. Luo Lin was already familiar with what he had to do next. The first thing to do is to take Harry shopping for clothes. Just when I stepped into Madame Malkin's robe shop, Luo Lin suddenly thought of a question. That unfortunate boy Malfoy isn't in the shop, is he? Logically speaking, he did not take the time to get the Philosopher's Stone this time. He just took out the money and arrived at Madame Malkin's robe shop earlier than in the original work. I don't know if Malfoy is here at this time. When Mrs. Malkin saw Luo Lin, she seemed extremely enthusiastic compared to the fear of meeting Luo Lin for the first time. It's not that Luo Lin brought her a few students and made her money. That little money to buy clothes is nothing. Mainly because Mrs. Malkin gradually recognized Luo Lin's character. Every time Rowling brings students born from Muggle families to Diagon Alley, always meticulous, accompanying from start to finish and answering all questions. All this was seen by the people in Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley is a relatively closed small community, 1 past to 10 and 100 to 10. Now most people know that Rolin is not as scary as the rumors say. Instead, he is a responsible and cheerful big boy. Big boy. Compared to these people in Diagon Alley, Luo Lin is undoubtedly a big boy for his age. Naturally, they were more tolerant of Luo Lin and no longer guarded Luo Lin like a thief. Most people began to become friendly to Luo Lin. Even a small group of more stubborn people would not deliberately say or do anything in front of Luo Lin. Certainly, these people may also be more concerned about their lives. Luo Lin felt Mrs. Malkin's enthusiasm and smiled slightly. Mrs. Malkin, look who I brought. Once you get acquainted with each other, you won't be so polite when getting along with them. Mrs. Malkin looked at the person next to him with some doubts. When she noticed the lightning scar on his forehead, she was stunned. You are Mr. Harry Potter. Harry now somewhat understood his reputation in the wizarding world, and nodded helplessly. Good morning, Mrs. Malkin. Good morning, Mr. Potter. Advertisement. Madame Malkin's voice suddenly rose, and the witch inside couldn't help but rush out. Where is Mr. Potter? As a legend in wizarding society, there's no wizard who wouldn't want to meet Harry Potter. The witch who worked in Madame Malkin's robe shop was no exception. She rushed directly to Harry. Oh, it's Mr. Potter. What an honor. Can you sign your autograph for me? As she said that, she took out a pen from somewhere, handed it to Harry, and then squatted in front of Harry. Harry held the pen in his hand and was a little at a loss for a moment. Excuse me, where is my signature? Of course it's signed on my clothes. The witch tugged at her wizard robe and said excitedly. When Harry saw the silhouette in front of her, he became even more panicked and his hands were trembling. He had never seen this scene before as a child. But looking at the current situation, if he doesn't sign, the witch really won't let him go. Harry couldn't help turning his head to look at Luo Lin. Luo Lin looked helpless. Your crush comes to you for an autograph. What's the use of asking me for help? Can I just drive this witch away? Harry seemed to see the meaning in Luo Lin's eyes and finally gave up. His hands shook. Signed her name on the witch's clothes. The name was signed crookedly and didn't look good at all. But the witch didn't care at all, and instead spun around in circles very excitedly. That's great. I will never wash this dress in my life. Luo Lin looked at Harry, who was blushing. I can't help but feel some sympathy. This means that Harry will stay in Hogwarts for a long time in the future. Otherwise, they will definitely be eaten by these witches. But an innocent boy like Harry is really interesting to watch. Luo Lin couldn't help but think of the time in his previous life when he went to the Magic City from the countryside to go to college. He was also very pure at that time. Let alone falling in love in junior high school and high school. I never even touched a female classmate's hand seriously. I just have a few female classmates I have a crush on. I almost forgot about it after I went to college. How beautiful it was at that time. I had a beautiful yearning for everything. I hate those animals in my dormitory. They all led him to bad things. Haven't finished college yet. Advertisement, he is no longer pure. Just when Luo Lin was reminiscing about his youth, Harry finally suppressed his shyness and came to Mrs. Malkin. Madam, I'm here to buy school uniforms. Oh, of course. I knew you would definitely enter Hogwarts, Mr. Potter. Mrs. Malkin, dressed in purple, smiled even brighter. Come on, let me try on your clothes. Harry breathed a sigh of relief and was about to go try on clothes with her. The witch suddenly spoke. Madam, let me do it. Mr. Potter is the only guest. Why don't you chat with Professor Razma first? Otherwise, wouldn't it be boring for the professor to be alone? Madame Malkin twitched her lips when she heard her words. While I try on Mr. Potter's clothes, can't you chat with Professor Razma? But she was also aware of her witch employee's ardent love for Harry Potter. He could only nod helplessly. Okay, but try to hurry up and don't scare Mr. Potter. The witch's whole body glowed. Don't worry, madam. I won't scare Mr. Potter. If Harry were allowed to speak his mind at this moment, Harry could only utter one sentence. Don't come over here. There was a flash of panic in his eyes. Not that he disliked this witch, but he always felt something was wrong with the look in this witch's eyes, which made him a little uncomfortable. Luo Lin looked at Harry with a look of relief. This is youth. But Harry is a bit too young and too innocent to enjoy this kind of youth. Witches can enjoy the joy of chasing stars and can get started directly. That's all. Harry was taken to the back by the witch. Rolin and Madame Malkin followed. He looked around at the back of the shop. There was no one else there, and it seemed like Malfoy hadn't arrived yet. So Luo Lin and Mrs. Malkin chatted all the time. Pay attention to Harry's side from time to time. Prevent Harry from getting screwed. The witch is quite serious when working and not too crazy. She made Harry stand on a footstool and fetched his black robes, which he pinned up. At the same time, we should also give him a length that suits him. During this period, naturally, the witch took action immediately when she had the chance. Except for the more private parts of Harry's body, she touched him all over. But she didn't go too far. She always stopped at the touch of a button and stopped at the first touch. Advertisement. Chapter 56. Harry was now on the footstool, feeling as if his days were passing by. Finally got to the end of the fitting. Harry ran behind Rowling with his face flushed, not daring to look at the smiling witch. Mrs. Malkin glanced at the witch helplessly. She looked at Harry with a trace of apology on her face. Sorry, Mr. Potter. She really likes you too much. Such an apology from Madame Malkin. Harry's face looked much better. It doesn't matter. I just can't adapt to such enthusiasm. See, he is not angry. Madame Malkin was relieved. Luo Lin joked from the side. Why? Can't you stand this little enthusiasm? Maybe you will face a more enthusiastic situation when you go to Hogwarts in the future. Hear what Luo Lin said. For the first time, Harry had the idea of not wanting to go to Hogwarts. But he saw the smile on Luo Lin's lips. He realized that Luo Lin was teasing him. Professor, although I was somewhat mentally prepared, I didn't expect them to be so enthusiastic, Harry said with a wry smile. No way. Who told you to be Harry Potter? To be honest, the enthusiasm they are showing now is just the tip of the iceberg. In the future, you will gradually understand how well known your name is in the magical world. Rolin's words were a bit unimaginable for Harry. Now it's just the tip of the iceberg. If he faces too many people from now on, he can't even imagine how brutal the scene will be. Harry couldn't help but shudder. The enthusiasm of the witch just now made him feel frightened. He felt it was even worse than the abuse Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia usually gave him. Okay, don't think so much. Maybe you will like this feeling in the future. It will take a long time. Just get used to it slowly. Luo Lin saw Harry's worry and comforted him. Harry came to his senses. He is a relatively optimistic person. Yes, it's still a long time. No one knows what it will be like in the future. Maybe by then he won't resist being treated so warmly. Finished shopping for clothes. Rowling took Harry away from Madame Malkin's robe shop. Before leaving, Harry saw a pale, thin young man walking into the robe shop. The two passed each other. The young man looked extremely proud. It seems that Madame Malkin's robe shop is a bit disdainful. Harry paid no attention to the stranger. Advertisement. He followed Rolin. Went to Flourish and Blott's bookstore again and bought all the textbooks. Then I went to the Crucible store to buy a pot and the drugstore to buy medicinal powder. At this time, the time has reached noon. There are still wands and owls left to buy. Luo Lin did not take Harry to continue shopping. Instead, he took Harry out of Diagon Alley, Ride Blake and Longbottom. Came to the Chinese restaurant he often went to before. Harry was confused. He didn't know why Luo Lin didn't take him to buy a wand and an owl first. The number of people that can be accommodated here is limited, so it's best to come around 12 o'clock. If you arrive late, you may not be able to eat, Rolin explained. Professor, do you like the food here? Harry couldn't help but ask. Of course, this is my favorite restaurant in London. I like it even more than the food in the previous hotel. Is it so delicious? It's not necessarily that delicious, but it suits my taste, Luo Lin said with a smile. Harry seemed to understand. But today, it's not that I want to eat by myself, but that I want to treat you to eat. Hearing Luo Lin's words, Harry was a little surprised. Invite me to eat? Why? Have you forgotten what day today is? What day is today? Today is not July 31st. Harry reacted. Today is his birthday. So, Professor, are you celebrating my birthday? Harry's voice was trembling. Luo Lin nodded. Of course, judging from your appearance last night, no one should have celebrated your birthday. As a professor, shouldn't I celebrate your birthday? He said it as a matter of course. But to Harry's ears, he felt it was so touching. His uncle and aunt hardly ever thought of his birthday. Luo Lin, a professor who only met once, not only always remembered that today was his birthday, but also specially found a place to celebrate his birthday. This is a life Harry has never experienced in the past 10 years. For a moment, Harry's eyes turned red. Tears were about to well up from my eyes. Luo Lin quickly patted his shoulder. Hurry in. I'm treating you today. You can eat with open stomach. He didn't expect that just for his birthday, Harry would be moved like this. He couldn't bear to see others cry. Harry nodded heavily. Yes, advertisement from now on. Harry felt that the most affectionate elder in his heart had become Professor Rasma. It's hard to describe this feeling, but he felt he would never forget it. Luo Lin has already tasted all the dishes in this Chinese restaurant, so he knows exactly what is delicious, what is not delicious, and what may suit British tastes. Didn't even look at the menu. After coming in, he directly reported a bunch of dish names. Then he handed Harry the menu again. Harry knew nothing about Chinese food. I randomly picked a few pictures that I liked and that was it. And this happened with just a few fingers. This gave Harry another unforgettable experience. He ate a black, elastic egg. Harry thought the eggs, which were almost like jelly, looked pretty good. Until I took a bite. The complex taste sensation in his mouth left him stunned. Is it tasty? Not tasty at all. Harry felt that none of the taste in his mouth was to his liking. But to say it tastes bad, it's not that bad. Anyway, it's very weird. Made him want to vomit a little. But he saw Luo Lin eating 2 black eggs without changing his expression. Harry swallowed the egg in his mouth forcefully. Then he learned the name of this egg from Luo Lin. Preserved egg. The taste of preserved eggs lingered in his mouth. It makes him feel a little uncomfortable when eating other delicious things. Harry swore that he would never touch this weird food again. Even if he starves to death, he will not eat. Finished a Chinese meal. Except for the preserved eggs, Harry was generally very satisfied. There were a few dishes that weren't quite to his liking, but most of the dishes were delicious. Harry therefore developed a keen interest in the distant eastern country, especially when I heard that Luo Lin came from a distant eastern country and would go back if there was a chance in the future. He had the urge to go to the mysterious eastern country and explore it. Maybe I can go with the professor in the future. Harry couldn't help but think in his mind. Rowling didn't know what Harry was thinking. After lunch, he took Harry back to Diagon Alley again. Advertisement. Chapter 57. Come to Diagon Alley. Rowling naturally wanted to take Harry to Ollivander's wand shop first. Just hearing the word wand, Harry was already a little excited. The things he bought before did not allow him to intuitively contact the magical world. But the wand is different. The wand is almost synonymous with wizards, and every wizard should have his own wand. This is Harry's perception. But he quickly turned to look at Luo Lin, because he asked when we were just eating. Professor Rasmus said he didn't have a wand and didn't need one. This was somewhat unexpected. Harry didn't know if there were many wizards like Professor Rasma, but he was looking forward to having a wand of his own. Walk into Ollivander's wand shop again. Rolin was warmly received by Ollivander, just like Madame Malkin and others. Ollivander is also very enthusiastic about Lorraine. Professor Rasma, do you really not want to consider buying a wand from me? Ollivander worked hard to sell, but he clearly wasn't trying to make money from Rolin. But I am curious about what kind of wand is suitable for Luo Lin. Luo Lin was a little helpless. Ollivander always asked him this question every time he came here these days. He could only take the trouble to tell Ollivander that it was not needed for the time being. But as a wizard, you must have your own wand. Even if it is useless, it is equivalent to having an extra partner. Ollivander has his own ideas and wants to convince Rolin. These days, Luo Lin took students to buy wands and watched them using wands. It was not that Luo Lin had never had the idea of owning a wand, but for my own wand, Rolin had his own ideas. He felt that none of the wand materials in Ollivander's wand shop were suitable for him. As a necromancer, he should have a wand belonging to the necromancer's identity. Luo Lin decided to slowly collect items with death characteristics in the future and save a share of raw materials for making wands. Advertisement when the time comes. Let Ollivander customize it for him. That will be the most suitable wand for him. Rolin told Ollivander his thoughts. Ollivander's eyes lit up instantly. Customized wand, special materials, necromancer. He murmured these words and became more and more excited. That's great, Professor Rasma. You understand our wand makers, not swearing. My ancestors and great-grandfathers specially customized wands for court mages. I didn't expect that in such an era, I would still meet someone who collects materials and asks me to customize it. He is also a necromancer. It is really an honor for me, Ollivander said excitedly. As long as you agree, I will collect the materials as soon as possible and I will trouble you then, Luo Lin said with a smile. Ollivander patted his chest and assured loudly, Professor Rasma, don't worry, I will definitely make you a wand that is most suitable for you. Well, I believe you. Ollivander is the best staff maker. Ollivander didn't expect that he would have an unexpected harvest today, and he was extremely happy. Then I remembered that Luo Lin had brought someone to buy a wand. He casually glanced at Harry behind Luo Lin, and his eyes suddenly straightened. Oh, it's you. Ollivander quickly walked up to Harry. Harry was a little confused. The old man had not noticed him at all just now, so why did he run up to him all of a sudden? Harry greeted quietly. Hello, Mr. Ollivander. Mr. Ollivander ignored him, just walked around him and muttered. Yes, Harry Potter, it's you, and yes, you need a wand. Your eyes are exactly the same as your mother's. I feel like it was yesterday when she came here to buy her first wand, 10¼ inches long, made of wicker and swishy when you swing it. It's a perfect wand. Ollivander stared at Harry. Harry felt a little numb at the sight of him and didn't know what to say. But after hearing the news about his mother, he was somewhat looking forward to what Ollivander would say next. Ollivander then spoke. Your father is different from your mother. He likes mahogany wands, which are 11 inches long. That wand is very flexible and powerful, and is very suitable for transfiguration. Your father told me that he liked that wand very much. Of course, the wand also liked him very much. After all, it is the wand that chooses the wizard. Ollivander came closer and closer. Harry was a little uncomfortable, but he still listened carefully to what he said about his father. It turns out that my father is a mahogany wand, suitable for the use of transfiguration. In other words, my father is very good at transfiguration? Harry guessed. Advertisement Ollivander's nose was almost touching Harry's face. He reached out and touched the scar on Harry's forehead. I'm sorry. This was caused by a wand I once sold. It was 13½ inches long, made of yew wood. It was extremely powerful, but it was taken by a bad person. If I had known that this wand would be sold to that person and let him do such a thing, I would definitely. Ollivander's voice became smaller and smaller. Harry wanted to hear clearly what he would definitely do, but in the end Ollivander said nothing. He looked at Harry and took out his tape measure again. Bring it on. Then he measured Harry's body. Luo Lin looked on. It's not much different from every custom-made wand before. Some time passed. Harry tried wand after wand. The more wands he used, the happier Ollivander seemed. In the end, Harry's wand was still the Hollywood, phoenix feather, 11 inches long, relatively flexible wand. Harry waved lightly, and red light appeared, like fireworks on the wand. Ollivander always gets excited at this time. But what he said today was different from before. Wonderful, really wonderful. Harry was a little confused, not knowing what he meant by wonderful. Ollivander stared at Harry and said seriously, Mr. Potter, every wand I sell has a memory. I use the 2 tail feathers of the same phoenix to make 2 wands. One is the wand in your hand, and the other is the wand caused to you. Scar's wand. Harry's eyes widened, and he took a breath. How could it be such a coincidence? No wonder Mr. Ollivander said marvelous. It's so amazing. Ollivander still couldn't help but sigh. Mr. Potter, remember, it is the wand that chooses the wizard. I think you will achieve great things. See how he looks. Harry had goosebumps all over his body and felt a little uncomfortable. Luo Lin watched this scene quietly from the side. No words were spoken, but if you want to talk, he can only speak one sentence. The gears of fate are turning at this moment. Advertisement. Chapter 58. Exiting Ollivander's wand shop. Harry still had lingering fears. Professor, is the person Mr. Ollivander just mentioned Voldemort? Well, do you feel anything special about using red phoenix feathers as the core of the staff? Rolin asked. Harry shook his head repeatedly. I don't know what kind of existence Voldemort is, but he looks quite scary. I don't want to have anything to do with him. After all, he is dead. Dead? A playful smile appeared on Luo Lin's lips. Voldemort is not dead. And you saw him not too long ago. Of course it was not easy to say this to Harry. Otherwise there is no way to explain how he knew the news. I hope so. Luo Lin gave sincere blessings. But he didn't think Harry needed it. Who makes him the protagonist of the world? It's useless to bless him. He will eventually meet him. Rowling has no idea of meddling in the affairs between Voldemort and Harry. Let's not talk about whether with his current level of necromancer, he can completely destroy Voldemort directly through a Horcrux. The main reason is that although he has a certain fondness for Harry, he is not good enough to do such troublesome things for Harry. This kind of thing still has to be left to Dumbledore and the others. Certainly. If Dumbledore was willing to give up his position as principal to him, he serves as the headmaster of Hogwarts. The heavy responsibility of maintaining world peace is on us, but it doesn't mean we can't save the world. At least Luo Lin felt that with his current strength, he would not lose to Voldemort. If Voldemort's Horcruxes were found one by one, maybe Voldemort could be completely destroyed. After all, we are playing with soul power. Their necromancers are the ancestors. Voldemort's simple method of dealing with souls can be regarded as a little troublesome at best, but it cannot be regarded as unsolvable. Unless Voldemort can be reincarnated as a lich. In this way, Luo Lin might not be able to do anything against Voldemort. Because as long as the lich hides its life box, it is almost invincible. In the knowledge of necromancers he gained, there is no way to kill a lich other than destroying its phylactery. But Voldemort definitely didn't know how to turn into a lich. I'm afraid only Luo Lin knows about it in the whole world. He had thought about it before. Advertisement: if you wait until the level of the necromancer reaches a particularly high level, you will not be able to live forever. He reincarnated himself into a lich. Liches are undead creatures. At least he could live until the fire in his soul died out. But if you can avoid reincarnating into a lich, it is best not to reincarnate into a lich. In that case, he would become brothers with his soul servants. He still prefers to be a human being rather than an undead creature. Hear Rolin's blessing. Harry always felt that something was wrong, and felt very nervous. But at this time they had already reached the Ela Owl store. This time there was no need for Hagrid to send Harry an owl. Harry picked out an owl for himself. His choice remained the same, a very beautiful snowy owl. Compared with Justin's snow owl, Harry's school looks more agile, but the body also looks smaller. Harry paid for it, but hadn't given it a name yet. He told Luo Lin to read a book first, and then find a name full of magic. Rowling felt that Harry's owl was most likely named Hedwig. After all, that was the name Harry found from the history of magic. Bought everything. The two began to walk outside the leaky cauldron. Through the wall and past the bar, they returned to the leaky cauldron. Old Tom was still chatting with others, but it was a different person, no longer Digu wearing a top hat. Luo Lin pretended to glance at the corner accidentally. Professor Quirrell was not found. It seems likely that Professor Quirrell has entered Diagon Alley and is preparing to attack the Gringotts vault. Gotta leave quickly. Otherwise, we might get into some new trouble soon. He didn't want to be discovered by the Aurors who came to intercept Professor Quirrell. It wasn't that he was worried that those Aurors would regard him as an enemy. He was already very familiar with the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic. At least they didn't think he would do anything bad. The main reason is that he is worried that these Aurors will make him a strong man and let him catch Professor Quirrell. That would be too much trouble. Say hello to Old Tom. Didn't wait for Old Tom to persuade him to stay. Rowling had already left the leaky cauldron with Harry. Old Tom felt a little regretful. His granddaughter is coming back soon, and she originally wanted to introduce Harry Potter and Rowling to her. Now we can only wait until they get to school to get to know each other. Arrive outside Diagon Alley. Advertisement: the atmosphere was somewhat silent for a moment. Harry remained silent and walked with his head lowered. looking a little absent-minded. Luo Lin was also wondering when Professor Quirrell would take action and whether he needed to hide further or go back to school directly. Walk to the entrance of an alley. Only then did Berlin realize that something was wrong with Harry's state. What's wrong, Harry? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Or have you encountered something sad?
No.
Harry braced himself. I think it's time for me to separate from you, Professor, isn't it? Oh, it turned out to be this reason. Luo Lin understood. Harry was unwilling to leave him and return to that disgusting home. Didn't want to face Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. But after understanding it, he was a little embarrassed. It was impossible to keep Harry with him all the time. He was going back to Hogwarts, and he couldn't wait too long for Harry. But let Harry go back alone. No Rollins. Who knows what Vernon, the bigot, might do. Luo Lin had indeed scared him before. But there is no guarantee that Vernon will do nothing. At least Vernon and Petunia would definitely cold-blooded Harry, there was no doubt about it. As a professor, he had to find a way. Don't let Harry get hurt or suffer cold violence. Harry looked at Luo Lin nervously. He could see that Luo Lin was thinking. He was hoping that Luo Lin would tell him that he didn't have to go back. But he was not willing to waste Professor Rasma's time. That would be so unfair to the professor. Harry lowered his head and thought for a while. You'd better go back on your own, or you'll have to endure the pain for a while. When school starts, I will naturally leave that disgusting home. Just when he was about to speak, Luo Lin's eyes lit up, and he thought of a pretty good idea. Sorry, Harry, I can't let you stay here forever. After all, I will go back to Hogwarts soon. Even though he knew this would be the result, Harry was still a little disappointed, but he did not show his disappointment, but said with a smile, I understand, Professor, I'll be fine. No matter how much a child pretends, how good can he be? Luo Lin saw his disappointment at a glance and said with a smile, but although I can't accompany you, I can let my undead servant accompany you. With it chatting with you, you won't be lonely. Advertisement. Chapter 59. Soul Servant? Harry couldn't help but look over Rolin's shoulder. Blake just lay there. At the same time, Longbottom was also at Rolin's feet. Professor, do you want Miss Black or Mr. Longbottom to accompany me? Harry couldn't help but ask. Black and Longbottom also looked at Rolin. I wonder if Luo Lin really has this plan. Luo Lin slowly shook his head. It's not them. I have many other soul servants. You can choose one of them to accompany you, but if you insist on Black or Longbottom, you can let them stay with you for a while. After all, you are familiar with them. The reason why I want to find a new soul servant to accompany you is because it's a pity that my soul servants can't come out all the time. So I plan to give them a chance to come out and play for a while, and they can also chat with you. Hear Luo Lin's explanation. Harry felt a lot happier instantly. Can't stay in London though. Need to go back to that disgusting home. But with an undead servant accompanying him, he won't be too bored. And he is also the undead servant of Professor Rasma. Maybe you can learn about Rasma's various situations from that undead servant. It will be convenient for me to repay him later. Then please ask the professor to call a new undead servant to accompany me. It would be better for Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom to stay with the professor. Harry's words made both Black and Longbottom nod secretly. They felt that Harry, the child, looked much more pleasing to the eye. Black didn't want to leave Luo Lin. She also wanted to increase her favorability in front of Luo Lin, and then asked Luo Lin to help her increase her soul strength so that she could surpass Longbottom as soon as possible. Longbottom didn't care. If Rolin needed him to do so, he would do it directly, but it was best not to leave his master's side. Hear Harry's words. Luo Lin also nodded. Okay, then let me think about who should be called out to accompany you. Harry was a little curious. Professor, how many soul servants do you have? 28 in total. In addition to Black and Longbottom, there are 26 more. Harry was a little surprised by Rolin's words. So many? Are they all the same as Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom? Pretty much, but each of them is different, especially in terms of personality. Harry thought thoughtfully, and he also saw that Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom had different personalities. Miss Black doesn't talk much, but she seems to be much more lively than Mr. Longbottom, and she also takes the initiative to talk. Advertisement. It's true that Mr. Longbottom won't speak at all if you don't talk to him. Harry had been sitting on Longbottom all the way to the leaky cauldron. He didn't speak, and Longbottom just didn't say a word. But Harry actually quite likes Longbottom's character. Although he talks little and doesn't take the initiative to speak, he always answers questions every time he speaks, and his answers are very calm and not exaggerated, which makes people feel at ease. If Luo Lin were to evaluate his feelings, Luo Lin would tell him that this is the aura of peace of mind that comes with being honest. Harry felt that he was very suitable to have a presence like Mr. Longbottom by his side. He had already begun to imagine what kind of undead servant Luo Lin would let him accompany him. It's really exciting. To be honest, Luo Lin was a little embarrassed. He has no requirements for the soul servants who come out to show off. Anyway, no matter who it is, as long as they stay with Harry, they can protect him and chat with him. So it doesn't matter who it is. This left him with a decision-making problem. Who should be let out? Rowling turned his attention to Black and Longbottom. Who do you think would be better for him to come out and accompany Harry? Mention this. Blake became energetic. How about Amber? She is very good at taking care of people. Or Flint. He will definitely like a child like Harry. If it really doesn't work, let Yaxley come out. With his character, he should be suffocated in there. The three people Blake named were all close to her. The main focus is to promote talents without avoiding relatives. Luo Lin laughed. The nepotism was finally figured out by Blake. He could only look at Longbottom, hoping that he could give a suitable suggestion. I think Avery and Malfoy are both pretty good. They both like to teach others, especially Malfoy. He taught me a lot. Longbottom is indeed an honest man. After he named the candidate, Black wanted to rush up and gag him immediately. What did Avery and Malfoy teach you? A lot. They have obviously played tricks on you many times. An honest person can't be this honest, right? It's really a bit desperate. Blake could only pray secretly in his heart. He must not let Malfoy and Avery come out. These two people will definitely target him after they come out. Advertisement Malfoy was okay. Just plain annoying. Avery is different. Avery is a pure king of pranks, more mischievous than both Parkinson and Weasley. Nearly a year before, Blake has lost count of the number of times he has been teased by Avery, and don't know why. Avery only played tricks on others once or twice before losing interest, but he insisted on catching her and teasing her. This makes Blake have to be extremely vigilant every time he sees Avery to prevent himself from being teased. Blake prayed for a long time, turned to look at Luo Lin, and felt a thump in his heart. She found that Luo Lin actually hesitated after hearing Longbottom's suggestion, and there was a look of interest on his face. Danger. Blake felt like a big word danger appeared above his head. So far, she could only lower her demands. Started to whisper, "No Avery, no Avery." Blake had given in. She felt that Malfoy was not unacceptable, as long as it was not Avery. The next moment, Rowling seemed to have heard Black's prayer and asked, "Is Malfoy okay?" "No way." In order to avoid Avery, Blake nodded against his will. "Ma Malfoy is pretty good." Luo Lin did not comment, but glanced at Harry. Harry was found to have no particular reaction. Then he came back to his senses. Harry didn't know Malfoy at all at this time, so he could have any special reaction. But Malfoy seems pretty good. Rowling recalled the little boy he met when leaving Madame Malkin's robe shop in the morning. That boy should be Malfoy. What if Harry went back with his soul servant Malfoy, and then met the human Malfoy on the train to Hogwarts? That scene. Luo Lin found it interesting just thinking about it. Advertisement. Chapter 60. Harry didn't know Rolin's bad taste. He had little feeling for the names Longbottom and Black said. After all, it was impossible for him to know Luo Lin's soul servant. He stood there quietly, waiting for Luo Lin to decide. Luo Lin thought for a while but still didn't decide directly. "Harry, do you think any of the names just sounded more pleasant to you? Or which one is more annoying?" He asked Harry for his opinion. Harry recalled the names. There was nothing unpleasant about it, nor was it very pleasant to listen to. So I shook my head. "Professor, you decide." "I'm fine with it." "All right." It seems that Luo Lin can only decide for himself. Since Harry has no special ideas, then just do what you think. It's up to you, Malfoy. Malfoy, he should be able to help you very well, and he talks a lot. You will definitely not be alone. Harry naturally had no objection to Rowling's decision. However, Rowling said that this soul servant named Malfoy talked a lot, and Harry suddenly felt a little uneasy. Although he wanted to have someone by his side to chat with. But I don't want to be criticized all the time. That would be too uncomfortable. But that's it. Harry would not refuse Rowling. He could only hope that Malfoy was not as talkative as he thought. Blake wailed in his heart when he learned the result. Fortunately, it was not the worst outcome she had thought of, and she could barely accept it. And anyway, Malfoy is accompanying Harry. After entering Hogwarts, it is not certain whether he can continue to stay outside. Maybe Malfoy will be locked up in the dark room again after he accompanies Harry to Hogwarts. Another surge of hope rose in Blake's heart. Longbottom was quite happy. Rolin took up his offer. Unlike Black, he felt that Malfoy was quite reliable, at least not as extreme as Black's prejudice. "I just joke with him sometimes. It's harmless. Now that it's decided it's Malfoy. Luo Lin no longer hesitated. He was about to take out the bone fragments in his own space and give Malfoy a body. Suddenly, he noticed Harry beside him and stopped. Malfoy was to accompany Harry. Advertisement let Harry figure this out on his own. Harry, if you want to summon Malfoy, you still need some preliminary preparations. It may cost some galleons. Can you accept it? Rolin asked, looking at Harry. Harry nodded without hesitation. Of course, this should be my responsibility. He didn't care about spending money at all. Not to mention he has so much money still in the vault. Even if he only had the money, he would agree without hesitation. Because in his heart, Professor Razma would never lie to him or harm him. For this trust in him, Luo Lin was quite emotional. In fact, he didn't do anything for Harry. I just performed my duties as a teacher with some compassion. But to be able to make Harry trust him so much, it can only be said that Harry's life before was really too hard. Feelings are feelings. Luo Lin didn't stop and took Harry back to the leaky cauldron. Old Tom was extremely surprised. Why are you back? At this time, Luo Lin also saw the little girl with twin tails next to Old Tom. This should be his granddaughter named Hannah Abbott, right? But he didn't spend much time talking to Old Tom. After Old Tom introduced Hannah Abbott to him, Rowling took Harry into Diagon Alley, then walked through Diagon Alley. We arrived at Nocturne Alley with ease. This is the first time Harry has come to Nocturne Alley, and your impression of this place is that it is eerie and terrifying. He didn't quite understand why Luo Lin brought him here, but he didn't feel too scared, nor did he ask. He just followed Luo Lin's steps. Luo Lin quickly took him to Bogenbach's store. I saw Mr. Borgin, who was wiping the shop. Mr. Borgin. Luo Lin said hello and almost frightened Mr. Borgin, who was standing on the stool, to fall down. Fortunately, he stabilized in the end. When Mr. Borgin saw Luo Lin, a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. Why is this guy here again? Could it be that there is no reason to rob this time, so we just plan to rob? But he soon discovered that he had been wrong. Rowling brought Harry to him. Advertisement as a black marketeer. Mr. Borgin reacted quickly. He recognized Harry in an instant, and then showed surprise. It's Mr. Harry Potter, Professor Razma. Why did you bring him here? After all, most of the items sold here in Nocturne Alley are related to black magic. Harry Potter was brought here by a professor at Hogwarts, with a slight sense of black humor. I brought him here to buy some bones. Luo Lin answered casually. Mr. Borgin's expression became even weirder, but he did not ask further questions. Harry already understood what Rowling had brought him here for. I also understand why Luo Lin said he needed to spend money just now. Obviously, Professor Rathma's other undead servants, like Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom, all need a body. Think of this. Harry unconsciously looked at this somewhat scary shop and observed the bones here. He felt that Professor Rathma wanted him to choose a body for Malfoy. So he chose very carefully. There are no complete human bones displayed outside the store, but there are many skeletons of other animals. Thinking that Miss Black was an owl and Mr. Longbottom was a cat, he felt that he should choose a different creature for Malfoy. Look left and right. Harry suddenly discovered a small skeleton with a relatively long nose bone. As he watched, Mr. Borgin had appeared near him. How about Mr. Potter? This skeleton is pretty good, isn't it? Harry nodded subconsciously and asked at the same time. What kind of creature's skeleton is this? This is not the skeleton of an ordinary creature. This is the skeleton of a magical creature. It is incredible. Mr. Borgin subconsciously wanted to flatter and raise the price. Then I thought that Luo Lin was around. When he turned around and saw Luo Lin's smiling face, his body couldn't help but tremble and he immediately calmed down. Anyway, this is a very good skeleton. If you need it, Mr. Potter, I can sell it to you cheaply. Magical creature? Harry was really interested now. Talk about magical creatures. It seems that he has really never seen it, unless owls are also considered magical creatures. Or maybe Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom can be considered magical creatures. His knowledge of magical creatures comes from myths and legends, like the legendary dragon, phoenix, and so on. But I have never heard of an animal with such a long nose and a medium body. Harry knelt down and looked at the skeleton in front of him. A little curious, I asked, what magical animal is this? Advertisement. Chapter 61. Heard Harry ask. Mr. Borkin said, just a moment. He walked behind the counter, took out a handful of picture albums, turned to a certain page, and handed it to Harry. It's this thing, called Xiao Nifule. Sniff? Harry had never heard of such an animal. He took the album. I saw an animal with a long nose and a body covered with black fur. Below is an introduction to this amazing animal. The Niffler is an animal that digs the ground and has a special preference for all shiny things. It will present the treasure it finds to its owner. Wizards often raise it to dig for treasure deep underground. He has a gentle personality and is even affectionate towards people. But don't keep it at home, because it can cause damage to your belongings. It would be best if he lived in his own lair, perhaps 20 feet underground. Harry became interested. Isn't this a legendary treasure-hunting beast? It turns out that there really is such a thing in the magical world. What if there was a Niffler? Doesn't it mean that there will be no shortage of money in the future? However, he quickly rejected this idea. If only it were that simple. Wouldn't other wizards think of it? I'm afraid everyone's pet will become a Niffler. Moreover, Xiao can only look for those treasures that have no owners. Even if it can find things that really have owners, it is impossible to rob them. Harry looked through the picture album carefully. Luo Lin also observed Xiao's skeleton. The skeleton of this Xiao is very complete, but one toe is missing, and a suitable bone needs to be found to replace it. Nothing else is a problem. He turned to look at Harry and asked, "Harry, what do you think of this Niffler skeleton?" He wanted to know if Harry was going to buy the skeleton. If not, he plans to buy it. The skeleton of this Niffler is quite nice. Or the skeleton of a magical creature. Soul servants have a unique point. The bones they settle in are basically intact skeletons, and the owner of the skeleton has special abilities during his lifetime. The soul servant who lives in the skeleton can obtain part of the original ability. Advertisement, of course, it is definitely not as good as living creatures, but it is also of some use to Luo Lin. Luo Lin wanted to own a treasure-hunting rat in his previous life. Under tremendous work pressure, he thought about lying in a rented house every day, eating and waiting to die, and then letting the treasure hunter get him money every day. It's a pity that it is just a beautiful yearning, and it is difficult to realize it in a dream. After thinking about it, you still have to go to work. This life is different. There really is such a thing as Xiao. He decided to realize his dream from his previous life. When the time comes, let the soul servant enter the skeleton, and then go out to hunt for treasure every day. No matter if you can find something valuable or not. It's all a different kind of fun. A bit like the traveling frog that Rolin plays with in his spare time. But at that time it was called Frog Cub, this one should be called Sniff Cub. Rolin's question made Harry hesitate. He actually wanted to buy it. After all, Niffler didn't look ugly, and he was a magical animal, but he didn't know if he had enough money. So he asked Mr. Borgin, "How many galleons does this sniffing skeleton cost?" Mr. Borgin answered very cautiously this time. "It's not very expensive. I'll sell it to you at the purchase price, 2 galleons and 10 cats. Harry's eyes lit up. It's so cheap. So he has more than enough money. Then he turned to look at Luo Lin. Luo Lin nodded, and Harry understood. "Okay, then I will buy this." Mr. Borkin breathed a sigh of relief. What he quoted was indeed the cost price. Mainly because I really don't want to offend Luo Lin. If it weren't for the bottom line as a businessman, he wouldn't be able to sell things at a loss. Maybe he could sell the bones to Harry at a loss. "Okay, then I'll help you install it." Mr. Borgin went to find a box, carefully placed the Niffler skeleton, and handed it to Harry. Harry took it slowly, so as not to accidentally drop the box to the ground and break any bones. Things have been bought. Luo Lin was about to leave, but when he turned his head and looked around, he happened to see a suitable phalange among the pile of broken bones. Thinking that the Niffler skeleton was missing a toe bone, he bought the finger bone and then left here with Harry. But Rowling was in no hurry to leave Nocturne Alley. Advertisement, he was going to inject his soul directly here. The undead atmosphere in Nocturne Alley is relatively strong. It is more suitable for the soul servant to adapt to the new body. In such a gloomy environment, Rowling and Harry stood facing each other. Harry was somewhat looking forward to the original scene. Black and Longbottom stayed together. Blake didn't look that happy, especially when he saw the box Harry was holding. She whispered to Longbottom, "Malfoy is really lucky to have the body of a magical animal. Fortunately, the owner didn't buy it for him. Otherwise, I would be mentally unbalanced." Longbottom smiled honestly. "Don't worry, Black. Sooner or later you will have the body of a magical animal. Or you can also have the body of a wizard. Just wait for the master to become stronger and stronger." "Oh." Black glanced at Longbottom in surprise. "Longbottom, I didn't expect you to have such awareness. It seems you are indeed not stupid. But just thinking about Malfoy coming out with a body that is much better than mine makes me feel a little unhappy. It was the same when I first had a body. His body frame was actually 2 inches taller than mine. That was simply a shame for me." When Black talked about what happened at the beginning, Longbottom nodded. You were indeed shorter than him at the time, but he has a boy's frame and you have a girl's frame. Isn't it normal to be shorter? Black was dissatisfied. Why should girls be shorter? Sooner or later, I will be taller than Malfoy. Okay, I support you. Definitely more than Malfoy. Longbottom's tone was sincere. Blake felt much better instantly. Rowling was asking Harry to take the Niffler skeleton out of the box and place it on the ground. Hear the conversation between Black and Longbottom. Some dumbfounded. If the conversation between the two people was placed on the internet in the previous life, there were probably punchers and counterpunchers coming to attack them. Soon, the Niffler skeleton has been placed. Luo Lin asked Harry to step back a little and open the Soul Servant module. He scrolled up and found Malfoy's name. Then with a thought, a green fire appeared on his fingertips. Harry looked at the fire between Roland's fingers and held his breath, waiting for the next move. The fire at Luo Lin's fingertips kept getting stronger, and finally a huge flame burst out. Right now, he flicked the flame casually, and it hit the sniffing skeleton on the ground. Sniff's skeleton creaked a few times. A voice came from above. Ha ha ha, I finally came out. Advertisement. Chapter 62. An arrogant voice suddenly came from the sniffing skeleton. Harry was startled, but he soon realized that this was what the undead servant named Malfoy said. So he looked at the sniffing skeleton curiously. This undead servant named Malfoy is completely different from Miss Black and Mr. Longbottom. He doesn't sound like a good person at all. Gala. Shosho's skull moved first, then his two arms, and finally his leg bones. Two skeletal hands pushed to the ground. The sniffing skeleton on the ground stood up straight. Harry also saw the green light flashing in its eyes. Malfoy was obviously still getting used to this body. Wait until the green light in his eyes stabilizes. Malfoy is the one who occupies this skeleton. Black saw Malfoy's look and shook his head. What an arrogant guy. He actually calls himself uncle in front of the master. Longbottom nodded. This time he agreed with Black. Malfoy is so disrespectful to the master. We need to talk to him. You go ahead and tell me. I don't want to talk to this nasty guy. Blake refused without hesitation. Longbottom didn't force it. Well, I'll tell him later. If he didn't act like this before, he must have been locked up for too long. Luo Lin watched Malfoy occupying the sniffing skeleton and nodded secretly. For Malfoy and the other soul servants, changing a body is no different from changing a piece of clothing for an ordinary person. It's just that they often have to wear this dress for a longer period of time. As for Malfoy's arrogant shouting just now, Luo Lin didn't care at all. Malfoy's character is like this. He respects his master, but for others, he simply puts his eyes above his own. This is the character of the soul servant itself. Even Luo Lin, the necromancer, is difficult to change, unless he directly uses means to tamper with the soul essence of the soul servant. Otherwise, just changing the memory won't work. Each of Rolin's soul servants is unique. Since they were summoned from the void by Luo Lin, they have been finalized. Luo Lin was unwilling to change them. Deep down in his heart, he regarded these soul servants as friends. Just because he is the master, the impression engraved in the mind of the soul servant is that of supreme. Even if he wanted his soul servants to treat him equally, it was impossible to do so. Advertisement over time. Luo Lin accepted this situation. That is to respect every soul and respect their personality. You must know that there are many thorns among Luo Lin's soul servants. They didn't listen to anything except Luo Lin's words. Compared with those thorns, Malfoy is pretty good. At best, he is a little arrogant and very narcissistic. He also challenges those who are stronger than him and occasionally plays pranks. This is nothing, Luo Lin can accept it. At this time, Malfoy's soul state finally stabilized. The green light in the eyes of the sniffing skeleton became darker and stopped beating. He walked on the ground for a while. Then he quickly came to Luo Lin. Hugged Luo Lin's legs directly. Master, why did you let me out? Then he looked at Black and Longbottom. Forget it, Longbottom. Why did Black, a loser, come out before me? Is it just because he is a woman? Master, if you like women, I can also change the nature of my soul. Can you please stop locking me in a small dark room in the future? Hear his words and look at his appearance. Harry froze. Huh? Is this the Malfoy who just said arrogantly that I have finally come out? Holding the professor's legs and looking like this, he is obviously AB***H, right? He couldn't help but look at Black and Longbottom, but they found that the two of them were accustomed to Malfoy's appearance. But Black looked a little angry. Malfoy, who are you calling a waste? Don't you just have a stronger soul? In terms of caring, can you be as caring as me? Besides, you don't want to think about how disgusting you are. If you become a woman, it will be even more disgusting. You really don't want to make the master feel better, right? See them like this. Harry probably understood. Treating Rowling like Malfoy is probably the norm. He's absolutely right. Malfoy made this gesture just because he was more direct and because of his personality. Advertisement Black and Longbottom didn't think there was anything wrong with what he did. After all, he is the supreme master. Isn't it normal for Malfoy to ask his master like this? It's not just them. All soul servants think so. Rowling was almost immune to Malfoy's behavior. It was quite surprising at first. Now he is unfazed. Okay, Malfoy, don't even think about the trouble you and Avery and the others caused me last time. The things you did almost cost me my salary. How dare I release you in the first batch? Black and Longbottom never get into trouble. You have to learn from them, understand? Malfoy instantly lowered his head like an eggplant beaten by frost. But he still muttered unconvinced. That's because they have no personality. As servants of the great master, we need to have personality. Each of us is unique. How can we be content with being ordinary? His words naturally reached Luo Lin's ears. Luo Lin was very helpless about this. Malfoy and several other naughty soul servants are paranoid and have their own persistence. He couldn't force them to change. He could only say it again and again. But obviously, it's of no use. Malfoy still went his own way and insisted on his own opinions. No way. Luo Lin could only ignore his words. After all, Malfoy won't do anything illegal, so just be naughty. Black laughed like a silver bell when he saw Malfoy's appearance. Malfoy couldn't help but raise his head and glare at her. Blake, you have been out for so long. Have you made any contribution to the master? Blake raised his head proudly. Of course, I have done a lot of things for my master. For example, I carried him everywhere and, for example, I helped the master get clothes every morning. As she spoke, she suddenly felt a little lack of confidence. Malfoy sneered. I thought you had done something. It turned out to be such a simple thing. If it were me, I would definitely do big things for the master. What big things can you do? I only did these because the master doesn't need me to do too many things. Otherwise, I will do whatever the master asks me to do. Blake said loudly.
Haha.
Malfoy ignored Black and looked up at Rowling. Master, is there anything you need me to do? I must do it better than Blake. Advertisement. Chapter 63. Hear Malfoy's words. Blake moved his wings disdainfully. She couldn't be bothered to argue with Malfoy about this. After all, Malfoy will leave them soon to accompany Harry. Harry looked at Malfoy from the sidelines. I feel that each of Luo Lin's undead servants really has a different personality. The character of this undead servant named Malfoy is really interesting. With him by his side, I shouldn't be bored. Malfoy didn't know yet that he was going to be given to Harry temporarily. He is still looking forward to Luo Lin giving him an important task. After he completes it, he becomes Luo Lin's most trusted soul servant. When the time comes, he will send Black and Longbottom away, so that he can be alone with his master. If the owner feels that there are not enough people, you can also call Avery and the others out. He prefers to get along with Avery and the others. They have a bit of a like-minded mind. If only Blake knew what he was thinking. We'll definitely spit on him. Like-minded people are just like-minded people. Luo Lin was very pleased when he heard Malfoy take the initiative to ask for something. Speaking of which, I really have something for you to do. This is why I let you out of the dark room. Rowling's words made Malfoy even more excited. He still hugged Luo Lin's thigh tightly and said expectantly, Master, please give me your orders. Seeing how impatient he was, Luo Lin looked at Harry. This is Harry Potter. Oh. Rowling introduced Harry, while Malfoy seemed a little cold. Apart from his master, Malfoy had no good impression of these humans. He didn't quite understand why Luo Lin wanted to introduce Harry to him. Harry, he is Malfoy. Hello, Mr. Malfoy. Harry seemed very polite and stepped forward to say hello to Malfoy. Malfoy nodded, hummed and stopped talking, but continued to look up at Luo Lin. Master, what on earth am I going to do? He doesn't care about human imps now. He just wants to know what he can do for Luo Lin. What you are about to do has something to do with Harry. Malfoy was stunned by Rolin's words. Is it related to this brat? Advertisement. Malfoy finally looked at Harry. I found out that this was just an ordinary human kid, but it seems to be a wizard. You can feel the aura that belongs to the wizard from him. Does the master want me to kill this little human wizard? Malfoy couldn't help but ask. Luo Lin twitched the corner of his mouth. What do you think? Hee hee. Of course Malfoy knew what he said was impossible. Rowling had already introduced Harry to him, so how could he let him kill Harry? But, Master, what can I do with this brat? Does Master want to accept him as a disciple or godson? So let me teach him well? Malfoy gave full play to his imagination. What are you talking about? I am now a professor at Hogwarts, and Harry is the new student who is about to enter Hogwarts this time. But his situation is somewhat special, so he needs you to stay with him for the next period of time. Luo Lin felt that if he didn't speak clearly again, Malfoy would continue to use his whims. Harry didn't pay much attention to Malfoy's words. Instead, I couldn't help but start thinking. If the professor were my godfather, then I would be so happy, right? Malfoy froze again. Master, are you asking me to leave the great master and go accompany this brat? Malfoy instantly felt aggrieved. Master, you can't do this. How can I leave the supreme master? This human brat doesn't need anyone to accompany him at first sight. He seemed extremely reluctant. Luo Lin slowly shook his head. This matter has been decided. The reason why you can come out is entirely because of this matter. Otherwise, you should still be staying with other people now. Malfoy felt his heart break. He originally thought that he came out to do great things for his master, but she didn't expect that she would be a nanny and take care of a human child. Even Blake seems to be inferior to these things. After all, Blake was still working for his master, but he had already left his master. Malfoy couldn't even look at Black now. He felt like Blake must be laughing at him right now. In fact, his feeling was quite correct. Blake saw his despair. The mood is called happy. She was simply happier than Luo Lin, instilling the aura of the undead into her. It's disgusting that Malfoy ended up like this. It's really refreshing. Advertisement. She feels that she will be more motivated to do things in the next period of time. Thinking of being able to do things beside the master. Malfoy was going to spend time with the kid. Blake decided to wait for other soul servants to come out and make sure to publicize this matter. Then let's see if Malfoy will be as arrogant as before. Noticed Malfoy's appearance. Luo Lin raised his eyebrows. Why? Don't you want to? It's okay if you don't want to. Really? Malfoy suddenly became excited. If possible, he certainly wouldn't want to accompany a little kid like Harry. Of course, you just need to go back. I can let others come out, such as Avery and the others. Rowling's words made Malfoy completely give up. No, Master, I do. Malfoy spoke in a very serious tone, as if what he was going to do next was to send him to the execution ground. For Luo Lin's soul servant, they would rather stay outside than go back to the dark room. The little dark room was so uncomfortable, especially for a soul servant like Malfoy who is more active and yearns for freedom. He didn't want to stay in the dark room for a moment. So even if it is possible to be separated from the great master, he will still be laughed at by losers like Blake. Malfoy didn't want to go back either. That's right. Luo Lin is a very democratic person. Great respect for Malfoy's wishes. Malfoy has two options. Either stay or go back to the dark room. He is free to choose. It's so democratic. By the way, do you feel any difference in your body? Luo Lin was more curious about whether Malfoy had gained any special abilities in the Niffler skeleton. Hear his words. Malfoy just started to look at his new body, and then said, It's nothing too special. It seems like I'm just sensitive to a certain smell. For example, this one. Luo Lin took out a gold galleon from the storage space. Yeah, that's right. Malfoy nodded repeatedly, and his hand unconsciously moved toward Jean Gallen. This was his body's instinct, but he quickly controlled it. Advertisement. Chapter 64. Then can you detect anything similar to aura around you? Luo Lin was a little curious. Malfoy felt it very hard for a while, then shook his head dejectedly. No, Luo Lin didn't care. The soul servant occupies the skeleton of a magical animal and can only obtain part of its abilities. It is normal for the ability of perception to be weak. Then he asked, Can you dig the ground? Speaking of which, Malfoy nodded repeatedly. Okay, Master, do you want me to dig into the ground to show you now? No. Luo Lin just asked casually. It seems so. After Malfoy takes over Sniff's skeleton, he has similar abilities to Sniff. It's just weakened a little. This was consistent with the knowledge in his head. What do you think of this body? Rolin asked. Not bad, better than those before. It can be seen that Malfoy is quite satisfied with his new body. Then you have to thank Harry. Harry bought this body for you. Otherwise you would have had to be like Black and Longbottom and piece it together with bones. Malfoy was a little surprised by Rowling's words. He thought his body was given by his master. Unexpectedly, it was that kid who bought it for him. The original resistance in his heart weakened slightly. At the same time, Malfoy looked at Black and Longbottom. He had just recognized Black and Longbottom based on their soul auras and hadn't paid much attention to their situation. Now take a closer look. It was discovered that their bodies were actually pieced together with various bones. There is no comparison with his complete body skeleton. My mood suddenly improved a lot. Although he has to leave his great master temporarily, what he has to do is what the master ordered. Moreover, this body was purchased by that brat. That brat could be regarded as the master's student. It seemed appropriate for him to take care of the brat for a period of time. He has a complete skeleton, or the skeleton of a magical animal. I don't know how advanced the body put together by Black and Longbottom is. Malfoy once again felt superior to Black and Longbottom. It's like he has a piece of high-end clothing purchased from a brand store. Black and Longbottom mended their own clothes using sewing machines. Both are not on the same level. Win. Advertisement seeing Malfoy hold his head high. Blake's teeth itched with hatred. That stinking Malfoy. Isn't it just about having a good frame? So what? Although their bodies are made up of bones, they are also given by their masters. Malfoy's body was a gift from someone else, and it was nothing compared to what the master had given him. Right. Totally incomparable. Let me state in advance that Blake is definitely not bitter. She just feels that the gift from the great master is more valuable. Longbottom didn't care at all. Anyway, as long as he has a body, it doesn't matter what kind of body it is. After all, for soul servants, the most important thing is the strength of the soul. Things like the body, which are in the nature of clothing, cannot affect the strength of the soul servant unless it is a powerful alien species with a special bloodline. Black's soul fluctuations were immediately sensed by Malfoy, who paid special attention to her. The anguish in my heart just now disappeared all of a sudden. Malfoy turned his gaze to Harry, who was confused and didn't understand anything. The more he looked at Harry now, the more he liked it. This kid seems pretty good. Then he should do whatever it takes and do more to take care of this little brat. Okay, Malfoy, your body should have almost adapted to it, right? Rolin asked. Malfoy nodded. It's almost there. Although it's not perfectly integrated yet, there's no problem with normal use. Okay, I'll give you this toe bone. You happen to be missing a toe bone, so you put it on yourself. Rowling handed Malfoy the phalange he had just bought from Mr. Borkin. One toe bone is missing. For skeletons, the impact is actually not that big. There may only be a slight discomfort. Malfoy actually didn't care much, but when he saw that Luo Lin bought him a toe bone, he was instantly moved. Ah, great master. You are the most supreme being in the world, and I will always be your most loyal servant. Malfoy hugged Rolin's thigh again and shouted loudly. Luo Lin was a little helpless. Goosebumps were almost rising on his skin. He quickly pushed Malfoy away. Hurry up and pack the bones. We are leaving here soon. Malfoy nodded heavily. He placed the phalanges where one of the phalanges was missing. The soul power spreads from the fracture and extends to the new toe bone. Soon, in Harry's surprised eyes, the new toe bone fuses with the broken bone. The shape has also changed a lot. Advertisement it fit perfectly with Malfoy's foot bones, as if it was always there. This was Harry's first time seeing such a magical scene. It is really unimaginable that the undead can transform their bodies like this. Malfoy jumped on the ground a few times, and after confirming that there was no problem, he ran to Luo Lin's side. Luo Lin did not give him a chance to hold his thigh this time. Okay, then let's go out. Saying that, he walked out. Malfoy was a little disappointed, but followed Luo Lin respectfully. Blake seemed very proud because she had flown onto Luo Lin's shoulder. Being able to have such close contact with the owner, she felt that Malfoy would be envied to death. Clothes don't matter. It's important to be close to the owner. Harry also followed Luo Lin. That's all. The group left Nocturne Alley, passed through Diagon Alley, and returned to the Leaky Cauldron. The drinkers in the Leaky Cauldron were a little surprised to see the extra Malfoy. How to get into Diagon Alley once. Is there another undead beside Luo Lin? They found that there seemed to be more and more undead around Luo Lin. If only there would be more of this in the future. Will something happen? Some people have such worries. Luo Lin didn't pay attention to these people. After saying goodbye to old Tom, he left the Leaky Cauldron. Go through a few alleys again. Rolin stopped. Harry, it's time for us to say goodbye. Harry expected this and nodded sadly. But we will meet again at Hogwarts on September 1st. Hearing these words, Harry felt much better. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting the professor next time. Subsequently, Rowling told Harry about the tickets and the situation at the Hogwarts Express station. Let him go to school on time. Do it all. Luo Lin's mission was completed, and he stood directly on Blake's body and left. Looking at Luo Lin's back, Harry was a little reluctant to give up, but his eyes quickly became firm. Anyway, I can see the professor again in 1 month. Okay, kid, it's time for us to go. As soon as Luo Lin left, Malfoy's voice suddenly became arrogant. Advertisement. Chapter 65. Harry came to his senses. Look at Malfoy. Mr. Malfoy, let's leave now. Malfoy floated directly in the air. Okay, let's. Only then did he react. By the way, how do we get to your house? Malfoy asked. Harry blinked and looked at Malfoy innocently. Of course Mr. Malfoy took me. The green light in Malfoy's eyes flashed suddenly, and he said in a stiff voice, Shall I take you there? How did you get here before? The professor asked Mr. Longbottom to bring me here. Harry's words made Malfoy freeze in midair, and then he fell down. He seemed to have been hit hard. You mean, you came here sitting on Longbottom before? Harry nodded. Malfoy's hanging heart finally died. What the hell? He, Uncle Malfoy, actually wanted to use that child as a mount for someone? Although it is not a matter of nature. But carrying Harry on his back doesn't mean he is serving as a mount for Harry? Damn Longbottom. How can he be used as a mount for others? You must know that neither he nor Longbottom has ever been a mount for Luo Lin. Instead, I have to be trampled under the feet of a little brat. Master, why? Why do you want me to take care of this kid? Malfoy would rather go back to the dark room than serve as Harry's mount. But it's too late. Luo Lin's task has been entrusted to him, and he has to complete it. Harry looked a little confused. He suddenly felt that this little kid was not so pleasing to the eye. Mr. Malfoy, what's wrong? Is there something you need to do? Harry didn't understand Malfoy's confusion. After all, Longbottom had agreed without hesitation before, and he thought it was normal. Malfoy's voice became weak. No. Then should we go? Harry asked. Seeing his innocent look, Malfoy sighed and returned to his previous state. Forget it. You are a little brat. I won't care about you. He slowly lay on the ground. Come up, I will take you back. Harry didn't know what was happening, but he knew what to do now. Advertisement. He straddled Malfoy. Malfoy is much larger than Longbottom. It didn't seem too out of place for a child like Harry to ride on him. Wait until Harry is seated. Malfoy suddenly flew into the sky. Harry suddenly felt a strong gust of wind and couldn't help but close his eyes. Wait until it opens again. They have reached high altitude. Looking at the shrinking city below, Harry couldn't help but shout excitedly. However, Malfoy and Longbottom are different. Malfoy set off directly, and Harry was choked by the wind. Ahem. Mr. Malfoy, why is there such a strong wind? Harry couldn't help but asked loudly. What do you mean? Is there strong wind at this speed? Malfoy didn't understand what Harry meant either. It's an honor for me to carry you on my back. What are you still despising? What's more, isn't it normal for the wind to blow when flying at high altitude? But Mr. Longbottom would put a protective film around me before to prevent the strong wind from blowing me. Yeah. Hearing this, Malfoy slowed down and felt a sense of comparison. How did he do it? I don't know very well. From what he said, it seems to be some kind of soul power. Harry finally came to his senses and tidied up his clothes and hair that were completely messed up. Oh, it turns out to be soul power. Malfoy understood instantly and tried to build a protective film around Harry. Is that so? Harry actually didn't understand it very well, but he looked at it and said, It should be so. Then let's go on. I'll show you what real speed is. That guy Longbottom is definitely not as good as me. Malfoy suddenly increased his speed and rushed in the direction pointed by Harry. Harry was not blown by the strong wind this time and could clearly see the scene below. Wait until it's almost there. Harry felt excited and worried. These are two very contradictory psychology, but it is the truest portrayal of his heart when he is about to return to Privet Drive. He didn't know how he would be treated in the coming days. He didn't know what Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon would do to him. But after taking a look at Malfoy, Harry felt a surge of courage within him. There is Mr. Malfoy, the professor's spiritual servant. At least he wouldn't be alone. Advertisement, and judging from Mr. Malfoy's character just now, it would be difficult for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia to bully him. Malfoy took Harry back to the Dursleys' house. Other side, Rowling has returned to Hogwarts. Blake's speed is still very fast. When I came to Hogwarts, it was still afternoon and the sunshine was still beautiful. Luo Lin felt very lucky at this time, because just going to Nocturne Alley's Borgenbach store to buy a body for Malfoy was risky. The risk is that Professor Quirrell will take action during that time. That way he might get into trouble. But it's okay. Until they left the leaky cauldron, Diagon Alley is still a peaceful scene, and Professor Quirrell has not taken action yet. Now he's back at Hogwarts. Naturally, you don't have to worry about this problem anymore. Rowling returns to Hogwarts. The first one discovered was Hagrid. Hagrid was clearing a clearing next to the Forbidden Forest. Logically speaking, this should not be his responsibility, but he prefers to do this kind of thing in his free time. Otherwise, you can only go to Hogsmeade to drink. Hagrid is actually quite boring. Before Harry and others arrived, there were not many people in Hogwarts who wanted to deal with him. He has been staying alone in a cabin by the forest, with only a dog accompanying him. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why he likes raising magical animals so much. Lonely people like to keep pets. It's just that the pets Hagrid keeps are slightly different. After all, normal people would never keep a dragon as a pet. Not only normal people, but normal wizards will never raise a dragon. It is very dangerous. Saw Rolin in the sky. Hagrid excitedly waved the big broom in his hand. Professor Rasma, good afternoon. You are finally back. Everyone else said hello. It was impossible for Luo Lin to turn a blind eye. He let Black land directly in front of Hagrid. Jumping from Blake to the ground, Luo Lin stepped forward and stretched out his hand to shake Hagrid's hand. Good afternoon, Hagrid. You really do your duty. Hagrid showed a simple and honest smile, and his beard twitched and looked very funny. Thank you for the compliment, Professor. Why did you come back so late? Advertisement. Chapter 66. Hagrid asked while inviting Luo Lin to sit in the room. Luo Lin waved his hand and refused. Actually, I should have come back a long time ago, but Professor Dumbledore told me 2 things. Because I had to do those 2 things, I came back a few days late. Hagrid didn't force it. He put the broom on the ground and asked curiously, since Dumbledore asked you to do something, it must be something very important. Can you tell me about it? Of course, one of the things is to help him pick up something from Gringotts. I haven't seen what he picked up yet. It is probably something more important, and I can't show it to you. Hagrid nodded to express his understanding, and he had already vaguely guessed what Luo Lin was getting. After all, Dumbledore had already taken away Lu Wei from him, and the general situation was also explained. As for the second thing, it is a very special thing. I want to be a messenger for a student alone. Can you guess who it is? A mysterious smile appeared on Luo Lin's face. Serving as a messenger for a student alone? Hagrid scratched his head. Why did Dumbledore designate Rowling to be a messenger for a certain person? He thought about it for a moment, but he had no idea. Just when he was about to ask, an idea suddenly struck him. It's that kid. Luo Lin knew that Hagrid had guessed it. Yes, it's the famous Harry Potter. Harry Potter. It really is him. How could Dumbledore be so interested in him other than him? Hagrid murmured. Dumbledore should have let me go. I also want to see that child again. Hagrid, are you related to Harry? Luo Lin asked, pretending to be curious. Of course, I know his parents, and I was the one who took him to Privet Drive and saw Dumbledore leave him at the door of that Muggle house. Hagrid felt a little sad when he recalled what happened. Lily and James are both dead, and he is still so young. He suddenly looked at Rolin. Harry, how is he doing? Not very good. Rowling told Hagrid about Harry's situation. Hagrid's eyes widened, and he was furious. Damn it! How dare they? If I were here, I would turn them all into pigs. Luo Lin shrugged. Don't forget, Hagrid, you can't use magic. Hagrid suddenly became depressed. You're right, I can't use magic. Luo Lin patted his shoulder. Don't worry, it won't be long before you can't use magic. One day, someone will clear your name. Luo Lin said this. Hagrid knew that Luo Lin already knew what he had done. Knowing what happened back then, I could still treat him so equally, and even believe in him. Advertisement. Hagrid was even more moved. When excited, he reached out and hugged Luo Lin. Thank you, Luo Lin. You are truly my best friend. Ahem. Luo Lin felt himself surrounded by a huge force, and his thin body seemed to be crushed in the next moment. He quickly transformed himself into a ghost and passed through Hagrid. Hagrid hugged him blankly, and then he reacted, feeling a little embarrassed. Sorry, I always can't control myself like this. It's okay, but you have to be careful next time. If it's someone else, it's likely to be injured. Luo Lin was a little frightened. He suspected that he would break his bones just because he reacted a little slower. Although fractures are not a big deal to the necromancer, but it is a bit embarrassing to be broken by someone else. I will pay attention, Hagrid said seriously. Luo Lin had no hope for this. Hagrid, at best, has a strong personality, but at worst, he has a simple mind. Just head up. Where is the sanity left? By the way, Professor, Has Harry promised to come to Hogwarts? Hagrid suddenly asked nervously. He was afraid that Harry wouldn't come to Hogwarts. Of course, you can see him on September 1st. Luo Lin's words brought a smile to Hagrid's face. Just wait until he becomes a real wizard. Maybe he can leave those two muggles by then. Hagrid was looking forward to it. Well, I've told you the news. It's time for me to leave now. After all, I have to hand over the things to Dumbledore first. Hearing Luo Lin's words, Hagrid nodded. Go quickly, Dumbledore is in the office now. Rolin and Hagrid separate. Instead of letting Blake carry him, he walked to the castle. Along the way, he met several professors. The other party didn't say hello to him, so he didn't bother to put his cold face on his hot butt. Also met Filch. Filch looked at Luo Lin from a distance, his eyes full of resentment, but he did not step forward. At his feet, Advertisement his cat, Mrs. Norris, was also having hairy hair and looked just like Filch. Luo Lin ignored this small role. The path forward is very clear, Dumbledore's office. Boom, boom, boom. After knocking on the door, Dumbledore's voice came from inside. Rolin, please come in. Rowling was not surprised at all that Dumbledore knew it was him. Rowling even felt that the entire Hogwarts was under Dumbledore's surveillance. This isn't some conspiracy theory, but as the legendary wizard and principal, Dumbledore is fully capable of doing this. The purpose is not because of other things. I just want to observe the situation of each student and prevent them from having accidents. Professor, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Please have a seat. The two exchanged pleasantries. Rowling sat opposite Dumbledore. Dumbledore made him a cup of black tea and prepared himself some coffee. Rowling saw that Dumbledore had prepared milk and sugar on the table. If some people saw this, they would probably call him a heretic. But Luo Lin doesn't like drinking coffee, so he doesn't think much of it. At the same time, this also proves from the side that Dumbledore does like to eat sweet things. Making hand-brewed coffee takes quite a long time. While grinding coffee beans, Dumbledore asked Rolin, Luo Lin, how was your outing experience this time? He didn't ask about Luo Lin's mission, he just asked about Luo Lin's outing experience. Luo Lin smiled. It's not bad, especially seeing many students who are about to enter school, and it reminds me of my own school experience. Yeah. Dumbledore placed the kettle filled with hot water next to him and waited for it to cool. It's great. I can't remember going to school when I was a kid. Luo Lin smiled slightly and said nothing. He didn't know if what Dumbledore said was true or false. But Dumbledore is already so old. It's normal not to remember things from your childhood. Dumbledore brewed the coffee and added a lot of milk and sugar. For Luo Lin, it was definitely a lethal dose. He took a sip of coffee, with a satisfied look on his face, and finally got down to business. Did you get this stuff? Advertisement. Chapter 67. Hear Dumbledore's words. Luo Lin always felt a little weird. Why does it look like Hyson knows how to connect? He nodded, turned his hands, and a brown paper bag appeared in his palm. The paper bag looks a little dirty. Dumbledore didn't pay attention, but stretched out his hand to catch it. Look at the yellow paper bag that has not been touched at all. A trace of surprise flashed in Dumbledore's eyes. Luo Lin, haven't you ever thought about opening it and taking a look? Luo Lin shook his head. If you have to think about it, you must have thought about it, but it is not something I own, and you have not authorized me to check it, so naturally I will not check it. Is this your code of conduct? Dumbledore asked curiously. No, it's just my idea at a certain moment, and it may change at any time. Luo Lin smiled. He told the truth. It can be said that he does not have a consistent code of conduct, but do it completely according to your own heart. Just because he didn't want to look at the magic stone in the bag at that time, doesn't mean he won't look at it again if he encounters something like this again. All I can say is that everything is changing, including the human heart. Rowling's words made the smile on Dumbledore's face become more sincere. You're right, Luo Lin. The only constant thing in the world is that everything is changing, but some people can stick to their hearts and become better, while some people fall into evil ways and become worse. Everything depends on that person's heart. What do you think? Rowling felt that Dumbledore was persuading him to be a good person as an elder, but he was not averse to such persuasion, because he can basically be considered a good person, at least for now. And he also has very firm values, outlook on life, and worldview. Luo Lin doesn't think he will necessarily get better, but he doesn't think he will get worse either. Certainly. Still the same sentence. No one can predict what will happen in the future. Everything is changing. Luo Lin cannot guarantee what kind of person he will always be. That is a limitation on himself. Anyway, he just does what he wants to do and becomes the kind of person he wants to be. I remember it, Professor. Thank you for your guidance. Luo Lin nodded. Dumbledore also stopped talking. He took the brown paper package and placed it on his desk. He opened it and said, "Advertisement, Luo Lin. I have one more thing to trouble you next." Luo Lin was a little curious. Dumbledore actually opened the cloth bag in front of him. Did he want him to know about the Sorcerer's Stone? And why did Dumbledore still want to trouble him? "Professor, please speak." "No rush. Let's take a look at something like this first." "You must be curious too." Dumbledore smiled mysteriously. To be honest, Luo Lin was really curious. Although he knew that there was a magic stone inside, he had never seen a magic stone before. Being able to take a look at the magic stone at this time can also satisfy your curiosity a little. Dumbledore opened the paper package. There was actually a cloth bag inside. The cloth bag was also opened, and the magic stone was revealed. It was a dark red irregular stone. It doesn't look very good looking, but it's not too ugly either. It's a pretty normal stone. "Professor, what is this?" Luo Lin asked, pretending to be curious. "This is the Philosopher's Stone." Dumbledore looked at Rowling after speaking. Luo Lin looked as if he was stunned. "Is the magic stone the legendary magic stone that can turn stone into gold?" "Almost. It can turn any metal into pure gold. It also has another effect, that is, it can make the elixir of life. People who drink the medicine will never die." Dumbledore didn't hide anything and introduced it directly. "You can actually make the elixir of life. So many people must want it, right?" Rowling's words made Dumbledore nod. Many wizards want to get the Sorcerer's Stone, but there are too few people in the world who can make the Sorcerer's Stone. Gradually, everyone forgot about him. "What about this magic stone?" "This magic stone was made by my good friend Nicholas Flamel. He is the only person I know who can make the magic stone," Dumbledore said. The two of them asked and answered questions. Dumbledore basically finished introducing the Sorcerer's Stone. Luo Lin finally asked, "Then what do you want me to do?" "Protect the Philosopher's Stone," Dumbledore said seriously. Luo Lin was stunned for a moment and pointed at himself. "Me? Protect the magic stone?" Dumbledore nodded. "Actually, you are not the only one. I have already found several other professors, and we are all working together to cast spells to protect the magic stone." "Which professors can you tell me?" Luo Lin asked. "Advertisement, Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, me, you, and, by the way, Professor Snape." After listening to what Dumbledore said, Luo Lin found that compared with the original, there seemed to be one missing Professor Quirrell, who was replaced by him. He suddenly felt a little pitiful for Professor Quirrell or Voldemort. The thing that originally guarded the magic stone has one of its own. As a result, not only is he gone now, but he is also replaced by Luo Lin. Luo Lin still has a clear understanding of his own strength. Let alone being invincible, Quirrell is definitely far behind him. After having him, it becomes significantly more difficult for Voldemort to steal the Philosopher's Stone. It can even be said that if Luo Lin works very hard, there was no way Voldemort could steal the Philosopher's Stone, because he already knew that Voldemort was living in Professor Quirrell's body. To destroy Voldemort's plan, just tell Dumbledore the confirmed news directly, and then tell Professor Snape, McGonagall, and others. He didn't even need to take action himself. In front of Voldemort, so to speak, Luo Lin is naturally in an invincible position. Do we need to put in a lot of effort? This is a question that needs to be thought about. Luo Lin didn't think about it, but he agreed to Dumbledore's request first. "No problem, Professor. Then can you tell me why you need to protect the Philosopher's Stone?" Dumbledore thought for a while and finally shook his head. "Sorry, although I really want to tell you, I don't think it's appropriate yet." Understood. Luo Lin finally understood. Dumbledore didn't fully regard him as one of his own. It can only be said that the identity of the necromancer is too sensitive. Even Dumbledore. "I will also be cautious about this kind of thing." Luo Lin didn't care much about this kind of thing. He just expressed his doubts normally. In fact, he knows the answer. There is no difference between listening or not. "Professor, what kind of magic do you think I need to provide to protect the Philosopher's Stone? Do you need to use those particularly strong forces?" Rowling asked this question to Dumbledore. Dumbledore fell into thinking again. Finally, he said seriously, "The stronger the better. We need a strong guardian." Advertisement. Chapter 68. Dumbledore as his immediate boss. He said so. How could Luo Lin refuse? It can only be said that Voldemort suffered a lot. He estimated that this time Voldemort wouldn't even have a chance to run to the Mirror of Erist, unless Voldemort could get a way out of him. Luo Lin suddenly felt that if this was the case, he was a bit like an NPC. Give Voldemort a task, and then Voldemort completes the task and gets rewards from him, and the rewards can help Voldemort pass the test. It's quite interesting to think about. Otherwise, why not block Voldemort's path and leave a point where it is possible to pass the level? Just when Luo Lin was thinking, Dumbledore asked again, "Do you want to use magic, or do you want to use other things, such as your undead servants?" Undead servant. My undead magic is not very good at protecting the magic stone yet. Luo Lin opened his magic list and browsed through it. He found that he had not learned much of the triggering undead magic, and his level was pitifully low. And those with a slightly higher level are not suitable for use in this situation. In this case, using undead servants is the safest way. And Luo Lin felt that this was just an opportunity to place his soul servant. The soul servants must be exhausted from staying in the dark room. Everyone would be extremely happy to have the opportunity to do something. How about just putting 2 out? But what kind of skeleton should be used? Rowling thought for a moment and decided to throw this question to Dumbledore. "Professor, my more powerful undead servants are very special. They need the skeletons of other creatures to return from unknown places. What do you think I should do?" Dumbledore didn't know much about this. For things he didn't know much about, he chose to hand over all power to professionals. He just needs to help others provide relevant things. Everything is as you want. I have only one request, and that is to keep the magic stone and not let others take it away. As for the bones you want, I have some skeletons of magical animals in my collection here. Some are complete and some are incomplete. If you need that, you can just take it. Heard Dumbledore had a collection of skeletons. A trace of surprise flashed in Luo Lin's eyes. He didn't expect Dumbledore to collect that kind of thing. He thought Dumbledore's warehouse was full of sweets and musical instruments. But it's definitely a good thing for Dumbledore to have a skeleton. You can save money and get the skeleton of a magical animal. So why not do it? So Luo Lin agreed. Advertisement at the same time. It also shows that he can send 2 undead servants, and they are still relatively strong. Dumbledore had no intention of being stingy, and he directly agreed to give Rowling 2 skeletons. But none of his collection is here. Instead, it was placed in an empty room in Hogsmeade. The 2 agreed to go select together next week. It just so happened that Luo Lin could decide which 2 soul servants to bring. Luo Lin already had several names in mind, but I will also ask Black Longbottom and the others when the time comes. It's best not to let those particularly troublesome soul servants out. At least they can't come out now. After talking about guarding the magic stone, Dumbledore put away the Philosopher's Stone. A gentle smile appeared on his face again. "Rolin, how's it going with Harry?" Hearing that Dumbledore started to care about Harry, Luo Lin secretly shook his head. Dumbledore probably knew about Harry's situation, so he was so calm. Something was really going to happen to Harry. He doesn't even know how anxious he will be now. Harry's life is not very good. His 2 weird relatives. Rowling talked about Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon's attitude towards Harry and the things he did to Harry. How likely is it that Dumbledore knew these things? But he still looked sad. "This is all my fault." Luo Lin did not speak, but nodded. Harry's life is really hard. As a hero, he shouldn't live such a life. At least he should grow up healthily like an ordinary child. Dumbledore was silent. After a while, another topic was brought up. "Luo Lin, how are you getting along with him? Is your relationship good?" "Not bad. I quite like Harry, not because he is the boy who lived, but just because he is Harry," Luo Lin said with a smile. "Then let me tell you what happened today in detail. Today is the child's birthday, right?" Dumbledore was like a little old man who wanted to hear a story. Rowling begins by going to Privet Drive. It talks about Harry staying in a shabby hotel, Uncle Vernon's paranoid face. Then they lived in a log cabin. Then he showed up and took Harry away. Advertisement: stay in a hotel with Harry and have a big meal. Hear this. Dumbledore finally showed a slightly more relaxed smile. "You did well, Rolin. Harry's very nice too, Professor." "Well, you're right, that's a good boy," Dumbledore said softly. Then he motioned for Luo Lin to continue speaking. Rowling talked about how he took Harry to Diagon Alley to buy things and arranged for the undead to guard him. You still have to talk to Dumbledore about this kind of thing. Otherwise, what if the undead around Harry were discovered one day, being mistaken for some bad creature by others? It will be too much trouble then. Tell Dumbledore. Dumbledore can naturally help him pass on this news through various news channels. The skeleton following Harry is not a bad skeleton. It is his undead. This way you won't get into trouble. Luo Lin is very thoughtful. Dumbledore also felt that Rowling was very thoughtful. It was really a good idea to have the undead servants accompany Harry. There is no need for someone to stay with Harry to take care of him, which is a waste of time. You can also let this undead servant protect Harry and chat with him. From what Luo Lin said just now, He had already deduced that Luo Lin's undead servants were quite powerful. It must be stronger than ordinary wizards, let alone the Dursleys. Those two couples definitely couldn't continue to bully Harry. After listening to Luo Lin's story, Dumbledore smiled even more. He felt that Luo Lin did a good job, much better than he imagined. Fortunately, Luo Lin was thought of and Hagrid was not allowed to go. Otherwise, with Hagrid's careless nature, he might do something that violates the rules, or he might even forget something important. Luo Lin finished talking. I found that he seemed to have nothing to say, and he has completed the tasks assigned to him by Dumbledore and the school. Next is his free time. Think of this. He decided not to go out except for eating for the next week. Keep relaxing until the end. Advertisement. Chapter 69. Finish talking to Dumbledore about Harry. Luo Lin was about to say goodbye and leave. Professor, if I don't have anything else to do, I'll leave first. I'm going to go back and take a bath. Hear what Luo Lin said. Dumbledore smiled and nodded. Okay, then Rolin. We'll see you next week. Luo Lin drank the last sip of black tea from the cup in front of him, stood up, and walked out the door. When he saw what was happening outside the door, he couldn't help but frown. He saw someone he didn't really want to interact with. Snape. Snape was actually standing outside the door. He didn't know if he had just arrived, or if he had been here for a while. It seems that he has just arrived here, because Snape's expression became more gloomy when he saw him. Obviously, he didn't expect him to appear here. Because of what happened before, Rowling did not intend to have anything to do with Snape. Didn't even say hello. Walked past Snape. The same goes for Snape. The two passed by each other as if they were strangers who didn't know each other. Snape didn't take the initiative to speak. Luo Lin was quite satisfied. As long as Snape doesn't mess with him, he didn't bother to care about Slip either. It's good for the two of them to be strangers. He wants to go back to the dormitory now and take a nice hot bath. It's been a long time since I left Hogwarts. He missed the various foods in the auditorium. Luo Lin's back disappeared. Snape withdrew his gaze and knocked on the door of Dumbledore's office. Come in. Snape came to Dumbledore. Severus, why did you come to see me? Advertisement. Dumbledore saw Snape and asked. Albus, Lorraine Rasma came to you after he came back. Did you arrange something for him? Snape opened his mouth to question. That's right. Dumbledore was very calm. I asked him to get something for me, and he came to my place and gave it to me. That thing? Snape frowned. Dumbledore nodded. How dare you let him come into contact with that thing? What if he has evil intentions? Snape's words made Dumbledore shake his head and laugh. Why would he be evil toward that thing? He is now a professor at Hogwarts. Severus, please remember this. Albus, you should understand. He is not an ordinary wizard, but a necromancer. He is destined to be in the dark magic camp. Snape tried hard to convince Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked directly at Snape. You are a bit too paranoid. It's true that Luo Lin is a necromancer, but who says that a necromancer must be a black magician? From my current observation, Luo Lin is a very good kid. He is only 22 years old. Why do we have to assume a certain tendency of his? I don't agree. Snape was a little excited. Even if he is not a black magician now, how do you know that he will not be a black magician in the future? Then how do you know that he will definitely be a black magician in the future? Dumbledore asked rhetorically. He is a necromancer. He has the aura of a black magician all over his body. It is the aura of death. Can't you feel it? Snape did not change his attitude. Does a black magician have anything to do with breath? A wizard who has been doing good deeds all his life. Would you say he is a black magician? Dumbledore was very patient. But Rolin Rasma is different. He escaped from Azkaban, and he has a dangerous aura about him. Whenever I get close to him, I always feel familiar. Snape was very serious. I am certain that if that person returns, Lorraine Rasma will definitely become a Death Eater. Dumbledore was also determined. I said before, you shouldn't use what may happen in the future to characterize a person. Do you understand? As for Luo Lin escaping from Azkaban, it was the Ministry of Magic's fault. The Ministry of Magic should not have assumed Luo Lin was guilty in the first place, so Luo Lin did nothing wrong. Snape took a deep look at Dumbledore. Albus, you will definitely regret it. Dumbledore smiled. Severus, except for one thing, I never regret anything I do. Okay, I understand, but I will still keep an eye on Rolin Rasma. I don't trust him. After hearing Snape's words, Dumbledore sighed. Severus, I still say the same thing. Rowling is now a professor at Hogwarts and your colleague. You should not have such an attitude. Snape's eyes remained unchanged. I never wanted him to be my colleague. Dumbledore shrugged helplessly. Advertisement. Snape stopped talking and turned to leave. Just as he reached the door, Dumbledore suddenly spoke again. By the way, I asked Luo Lin to deliver the notice to Harry. What? The calm expression on Snape's face was broken. He quickly turned around and stared into Dumbledore's eyes. Albus, why are you doing this? You know, Dumbledore raised his hand to stop what he said next. Because I trust Luo Lin, and he has lived up to my trust. Harry likes him very much, and they get along very well. You shouldn't do this. Harry shouldn't come into contact with such people. You will put him in danger. There was anger in Snape's voice. This is how you feel, Severus, that something is clouding your eyes and preventing you from making the right judgment. It turns out that Rowling is a good boy. I believe he will not hurt Harry, and he will help Harry grow up. Dumbledore's words were somewhat unacceptable to Snape. A necromancer. What can he do? I don't think he can even teach defense against the dark arts well. All he can bring is ominous. If he becomes the Dark Lord, Harry will be the most dangerous person. Albus, what you did was wrong. Snape raised his voice. Dumbledore stood up. He did not refute Snape, but looked out the window. Whether it's right or wrong, it takes time to prove. Severus, at least so far, I am right. As for the future, I think I will not be wrong. Snape took a deep look at his back. I still said the same thing. You will regret it. After saying that, he turned around and left in large strides. His face was very gloomy, looking at the scattered people below and the clear sky outside. Dumbledore didn't speak for a long time. Finally murmured, "Will I regret it?" Rowling didn't know about Dumbledore's conversation with Snape. He was already lying in the bathtub, enjoying the bath. Black and Longbottom were making his bed. After taking a bath, it is natural to rest for a while. Advertisement. Chapter 70. After taking a bath, lying on the bed, Luo Lin began to think about his experiences these days. I think it's quite interesting. Compared to the life in Azkaban before, today's life is naturally more colorful. Certainly, it will also be more tiring. After all, there is more to do every day. But Luo Lin still prefers his experiences these days. I met Hermione and also met Harry. To a certain extent, it is a small wish fulfilled. After all, come to the world of Harry Potter. I definitely want to meet the protagonist of this world. Being able to meet Harry and Hermione in advance was an unexpected surprise. Life is full of little surprises. Luo Lin enjoyed it very much. After returning to Hogwarts, there was nothing to do for about a month. Except for going to pick out 2 skeletons with Dumbledore in a week, he is completely free. Of course, the first thing Luo Lin has to do during this period is to study the various contents of the Defense Against Dark Arts course carefully. That way you won't be embarrassed in front of the students. The second thing is to enjoy life in Hogwarts. Days without work or happy all time can be controlled by yourself. He had already decided to stay indoors. As a homebody, staying indoors is a happy time, but you still have to find something to do while you're at home. You can't sleep in the house all the time. Luo Lin likes to sleep very much, but he doesn't like it to the extent that he has to sleep all day long. He then thought of another hobby of his. Play poker. Certainly, this poker game does not refer to crackling exploding cards, but normal poker. In previous lives, every time he goes home during the Chinese New Year, he plays poker with his friends. That was his happiest time every year, because this is both a game and a communication between friends. The communication here is not the kind of communication in society. It refers to the connection between friends. Luo Lin didn't have many friends since he was a child, but he also had a few close friends. Advertisement. But since I started working, I have been spending less time together and more time apart. Basically, you can only see it when you go back to your hometown during the Chinese New Year. But even if we don't see each other for a year, the relationship between friends will basically not be affected. But as time goes by, there will always be a little rustiness. Playing poker happens to be a good game that can quickly get people familiar with each other. Think of past life experiences. Luo Lin suddenly felt itchy, and his heart was about to move. There happens to be nothing to do for the next while. How about finding someone to play poker with him? He has multiple decks of cards in his storage space. He had no one to play with when he was in Azkaban. Luo Lin was unwilling to contact those prisoners, so these cards were never used. Now comes Hogwarts. It seems like playing cards may come in handy, but then I thought about it. There were only 2 people he knew well in the entire Hogwarts. One is Dumbledore. One is Hagrid. There's nothing wrong with asking Hagrid to play poker. Presumably Hagrid would not refuse to play with him after completing his work. Dumbledore is a bit hard to say. He was the headmaster of Hogwarts after all. He is also the most important advisor to the Ministry of Magic. The daily work may seem easy, but in fact it is a bit difficult. Rowling didn't know if Dumbledore would be willing to participate in the poker game. If it were just him and Hagrid, playing poker is just not that fun. There has to be at least a 3-person landlord fight, right? But if Dumbledore wasn't involved, where to find the third person? Luo Lin was a little troubled. Besides Hagrid, is there anyone in Hogwarts who is willing to contact him? He started remembering all the people at Hogwarts. Needless to say, Filch and Snape were directly eliminated by him. It can be seen that Professor McGonagall does not reject him, but he wants Professor McGonagall to play cards with him, which Luo Lin thinks he does not have the honor yet. The other professors were more or less reluctant to contact him. There is no need to consider Mrs. Hooch, Professor Trelawney, Professor Sprout, and Professor Binns. The only one who could give it a little thought was Professor Flitwick. Judging from the last meeting in the auditorium, Professor Flitwick was the only professor other than Professor McGonagall who didn't look at him strangely. Advertisements certainly. The other professors may not have any special prejudice against him, they may just be curious about him. But their reluctance to actively contact him was still very obvious. Professor Flitwick showed no such attitude. He even nodded to Luo Lin when they were in the auditorium. Luo Lin was not very impressed by this little wizard with a little bit of goblin blood, but he didn't have any bad feelings either. If Professor Flitwick would play poker with him, that would be great. But will Professor Flitwick be willing? Rolin couldn't be sure. Logically speaking, it is school vacation time. Professor Flitwick probably doesn't have much work. If he wants to, then this poker activity can be carried out. Think about it. Rowling decided to ask Hagrid to inquire about Professor Flitwick's wishes. Black, I have to go out for a while. You can come with me. As for Longbottom, you stay here. After Luo Lin finished speaking, Blake excitedly flew to his shoulder. Okay, master. Longbottom didn't have any other ideas and nodded his skull. No problem, master. Then Rolin took Blake out of the room. Blake looked pleased with himself. In fact, she was very proud of it. Isn't it obvious that the master takes her with him instead of Longbottom when he goes out? Obviously her status in the master's heart is higher than that of Longbottom. Jane is in the Emperor's heart. Blake felt that he was being taken seriously and wanted to express himself more and more. Master, do you need to lie on top of me? I can take you away. Luo Lin shook his head. No, I just want to Hagrid's place. Blake was a little disappointed that his attempt to please his master failed. It seems that she still needs to think more about her master's thoughts and think of more ways to please her master. Rolin didn't know what Blake was thinking, but I also think Blake is a little too aggressive. But it seems like Blake has been like this lately. Luo Lin can only attribute this to the fact that Blake has been more excited recently. Maybe he is happier staying outside? He thought no more. Walking out of Hogwarts Castle, we soon arrived at Hagrid's hut. Hagrid had just finished sweeping the floor and was holding the broom to put it away. Saw Luo Lin coming. He felt something strange. Not long after Luo Lin left him. Why did he come to see him again? Could it be that I need his help with something? When Luo Lin made his thoughts clear, Hagrid was stunned. What? You want to play poker with me? Advertisement. Chapter 71. Hagrid's reaction looked a little excited. Luo Lin was stunned for a moment. Why are you so excited about playing poker? This is serious poker. Although I don't understand why Hagrid is so excited. But he still nodded. Yes, I'm afraid it will be boring for a while, so I want to play with you when I have free time. The place is in my dormitory. Sure, Hagrid said loudly. I'd be more than happy to, if possible. We could have a drink together. No problem. I can drink some fruit wine with you. You can drink whatever you want. Luo Lin knew that Hagrid preferred to drink. It can even be said that I want to drink whenever I do anything. He looked like an alcoholic. But Hagrid's wine is actually pretty good. Didn't cause any big trouble? At least that's what Luo Lin felt. Luo Lin is not averse to drinking. He just doesn't like the more extreme wine table culture, so he usually drinks alone. Occasionally I drink with my close friends. Everyone joked with each other and didn't try to persuade us to drink, so we were very relaxed. By the way, Hagrid, I want to play poker with at least 3 people, but I only know you in Hogwarts. Do you have any other candidates? Rowling did not tell Professor Flitwick directly, but first asked Hagrid for his opinion. Hagrid scratched his head in embarrassment. I don't know many people well. Professor McGonagall doesn't like these entertainment activities, and most people don't think highly of me. Rowling expressed his understanding and then suggested, how about Professor Flitwick? I heard he is not bad. Hagrid's eyes suddenly lit up. Professor Flitwick is indeed a nice person. He doesn't look down on me like others. Professor Rathma, are you planning to invite Professor Flitwick to play cards together? Rowling nodded. Yes, I selected among all the professors and found that Professor Flitwick seems to be more suitable. What do you think? You're right, but will Professor Flitwick be willing to play cards with us? Hagrid didn't have much confidence. Who knows, so I want you to ask for your help. I should have gone by myself, but I don't know him at all and haven't said a word to him. It would be too rude to go there like this. Hearing Luo Lin's words, Hagrid nodded. That's no problem. I have quite a lot of contact with Professor Flitwick. You can ask him, but it's best if we go together. Professor Flitwick has a good personality and won't think you are rude. Luo Lin thought for a while. Advertisement going with Hagrid to see Professor Flitwick seemed okay. Just enough to get to know one more person, so that Professor Flitwick wouldn't be too embarrassed when Hagrid called him. Well, let's go see Professor Flitwick together and ask him if he is willing to join. Even if he is not willing to join, I can just make friends with Professor Flitwick. After the decision, Hagrid closed the door. The two went to the castle together to find Professor Flitwick. Hagrid was quite familiar with Professor Flitwick's sightings. It didn't take long to find Professor Flitwick. The thin little professor was reading a book at this time. After noticing Hagrid and Luo Lin, he immediately closed the book. Then he stepped on the desk and greeted the two of them. Hagrid, good afternoon. This is Professor Rasma. I'm glad to see you. Why did you come to see me? Flitwick may be small, but he is very energetic, and his eyes are clear and approachable. Hagrid had just introduced Professor Flitwick to Rowling on the way. Only then did Rowling realize that the humble Professor Flitwick actually had a high reputation in the school, not only because he is the Dean of Ravenclaw College, but also because of his personal charm. According to Hagrid, even the most naughty student in Hogwarts will treat Professor Flitwick with the utmost respect. At this point, Professor Flitwick can be called the third person after Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall. It can even be said that Professor Flitwick's reputation is higher than that of Professor McGonagall to some extent. Among the deans of the four major colleges, Snape's reputation is naturally the lowest, except for Slytherin House. Not many students in the other three houses liked Snape, but Professor Flitwick was different. The four houses, including Slytherin House, all respect him. Got this news? The image of Professor Flitwick in Rowling's mind became more three-dimensional. I also have more respect for him. Good afternoon, Professor Flitwick. Hagrid greeted him. Advertisement. Hello, Professor Flitwick. Nice to meet you too. Luo Lin also extended his hand. Flitwick stood on the table, even lower than Rolin, but he did not have any other thoughts because of this, but shook hands with Rolin very naturally. Hagrid and I do have something to ask you about. Please tell me. Professor Flitwick asked the two of them to sit down. After all three of them sit down, Professor Flitwick made a show of listening. Luo Lin expressed his thoughts. He just said that he had nothing to do for the next period of time and was very bored. So I want to find a few people to play with and make friends, by the way. When I heard Luo Lin say that he wanted to play poker, Professor Flitwick's eyes lit up and he became more energetic. Playing poker and making friends, of course there is no problem. I also like this kind of activity. Professor Flitwick's words made Hagrid very happy. Great, Professor Flitwick. We can also drink together. What do you think? That's even better. I like drinking too. Professor Flitwick almost jumped out of his chair. He wasn't lying when he said he liked drinking. When he has nothing to do, he likes to go to the Three Broomsticks bar to drink. He can drink a large glass of mead in one sitting. Rowling didn't expect that inviting Professor Flitwick to join would go so smoothly. Professor Flitwick agreed as soon as it was brought up. Didn't think about it at all. It can be seen from this. Professor Flitwick does not have any discriminatory thoughts towards Rowling and Hagrid. He treated Luo Lin and Hagrid as equals. When he heard something he was interested in, he joined them without hesitation. He could already regard them as friends. Professor Flitwick readily agreed. Luo Lin and Hagrid both had happy smiles on their faces. Hagrid loved the fun of drinking and playing games with his friends. Luo Lin met a new friend and could spend the time before school started. It was the best of both worlds. Professor Flitwick looked happy too. That's all. The three of them made an appointment to go to Luo Lin's place to play poker tomorrow afternoon. Then Luo Lin and Hagrid left. Advertisement. Chapter 72. After leaving Professor Flitwick, Luo Lin and Hagrid soon separated. Hagrid returned to his hut with cheerful steps. Luo Lin went to the auditorium. What are you doing in the auditorium? Of course it's eating. It's only 10 minutes before 6 o'clock. Luo Lin didn't bother to go back to the dormitory. I plan to wait directly in the auditorium. He really missed the food at Hogwarts. It can only be said that the house elves below the auditorium are quite good at cooking. although they are all relatively simple foods to cook. But he has a good grasp of the heat. The ingredients are also very fresh. The food here ranks above all the food I have eaten in Luo Lin. It's not as good as the Turkish food and Chinese food I had a few days ago, but compared to fish and chips, I don't know how much better it is. Luo Lin sat in the auditorium. There were also some people in the auditorium at this time. Basically, there are students in groups of 3 to 5. These senior students fall into 2 categories. One type has never left school since the holidays. They did not choose to go back, but stayed in school. The other is to go back, but not stay too long, then come back here again. At this time, they were talking about Luo Lin. Rowling is a very special being in Hogwarts. From the day he joined Hogwarts. No. It can even be said that it started from the day when it was reported that Dumbledore wanted to invite him to join Hogwarts. The students started talking about him. Most of the students are only 14 or 15 years old. He knew little about Luo Lin. I only know that Luo Lin is a necromancer and has escaped from prison twice, but he doesn't know anything else. So they were curious about Rolin. Luo Lin is a very special existence to them, and their psychology is very contradictory. They are somewhat afraid of Luo Lin's identity as a necromancer, but they also want to explore Luo Lin's various situations. After all, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. As a group of kids, they are not as stubborn as those older people, nor do they have fixed thinking. They hope they can learn more about Luo Lin. Luo Lin didn't care about these students' comments. He thinks the students are very interesting. As long as he's not the kind of naughty kid with a bad personality, he's very tolerant. Since there are still 10 minutes left, advertisement Luo Lin felt a little bored. He took out a deck of playing cards from the storage space. I haven't played cards for a long time. He plans to get familiar with playing cards, so that when I play cards with Hagrid and Flitwick tomorrow, I won't even be able to shuffle the cards. Of course, this is an exaggeration. Shuffling cards has become instinctive for Luo Lin. He moved both hands together. Hand shuffle. Quickly cut cards. Shuffle control cards. I tried all the poker techniques I learned in my previous life. Of course, some of them failed. I haven't played for a long time, and I have become a bit rusty. But there are also successful ones. I saw Luo Lin playing cards here. The little wizards around looked attentively. As a wizard, they will all have some magic. But they found Luo Lin's occasional magic tricks very magical. I watched it for 10 minutes. It wasn't until dinner started in the auditorium and Luo Lin put away the playing cards that they reluctantly turned their heads. Then they discussed with each other Luo Lin's poker playing technique just now, and also discussed Luo Lin as a person. Is that Professor Razma? My mother said he is scary, but he looks like an ordinary wizard. Not gloomy at all. Is Professor Razma a necromancer? It doesn't look like him at all, and he looks so handsome and his moves are so cool, especially when he was playing cards just now. I also like to play cards. Professor Razma just acted like he was performing magic. I really want to learn from him. I'll definitely be cool if I learn how to perform for everyone. The little wizards discovered that Luo Lin was not as scary as the legend said. We even played poker naturally in the auditorium. This is nothing like the legendary necromancer. After watching Luo Lin play poker, the little wizards found themselves more curious about Luo Lin, and the vague rejection in their hearts was much less. Luo Lin didn't care about the psychological changes of the little wizards. He is eating and drinking now, and he is very happy. Miss the food here. Rolin chose to eat a little of everything. Even food that I had not tried much before was served. Then he found something delicious. Scotch eggs. Eggs are wrapped in sausage meat, then coated with breaded crab and baked. Take one bite. Full of fat and protein. Advertisement, it tastes so good. It was not enough for Luo Lin to finish one, so he ate 3 in one go. Wait until he finishes all the food on the plate. My belly is already swollen. Hiccup, Luo Lin couldn't help but burped. Stroking his swollen belly, he was extremely satisfied. This is enjoyment. Sure enough, eating is his favorite thing. Eating delicious food is the happiest thing. The main meal is finished. Rolin rested for a while and even had another dessert, Yorkshire pudding. A pudding with a unique look and taste. After eating, he left the auditorium and returned to the dormitory. Sitting on the bed, let Longbottom and Black massage him a little. Luo Lin only felt refreshed. Looking at his dormitory, he decided to give the dormitory a little makeover. After all, Hagrid and Professor Flitwick are coming here tomorrow to play cards. The dormitory looks great now, of course. At least it's much better than other dormitories. But he still hopes to give his friends a more perfect experience. First, Luo Lin put all the things that could be stored in the dormitory into the utility area, leaving only a bed. Then start looking for things in the storage space and place them in categories. The most important thing is of course the table for playing cards. He has multiple desks in his storage space. One of the tables was so big that it took up half the room and looked very grand. But it cannot be used in this card game. He had to take Professor Flitwick's physical condition into consideration. Of course, Hagrid's physical condition also had to be considered. So he chose a triangular table. Considering Professor Flitwick's height, Luo Lin specially prepared a small retractable chair. After adjusting the height to a suitable position, a shorter sofa was specially prepared for Hagrid so that he could sit more comfortably. Luo Lin himself also chose a telescopic chair so that he can adjust the height at any time. Tables and chairs are ready. The rest is relatively simple. Hagrid offered to drink tomorrow. Luo Lin moved the spare bar in the storage space to the dormitory. He took out dozens of bottles from his living area and placed them on the bar. All that's left is some decoration. Luo Lin worked hard to make the dormitory look like a relaxing place. Advertisement. Chapter 73. The next day, when Hagrid and Professor Flitwick came to Rowling's dormitory, both of them opened their eyes wide and were dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of my eyes. What's going on? Is this still a dormitory? Are you sure this isn't some small high-end entertainment venue? Gorgeous sofa. Colorful decoration. There was even a large fish tank next to the table, which contained fish that Blake had just caught from the lake not long ago. The two looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. They thought back to where they lived. Suddenly I felt that the place I lived in was simply a doghouse, completely incomparable to the place in front of me. How did Rolin do it? The two set their sights on Luo Lin. Luo Lin led them to sit down on the sofa. Asked, "Do you two want to drink tea or coffee, or just drink alcohol?" "Let's have a cup of black tea first," Hagrid said. "Then I'd like a cup of coffee." Professor Flitwick thought for a moment and said, Luo Lin first brewed black tea for Hagrid, and then brought him sugar and milk. Then make coffee for Professor Flitwick. His technique of making hand-ground coffee is not as good as Dumbledore's, but it still looks pleasing to the eye. Finally, he made himself a cup of green tea. The three of them were sitting on the sofa, drinking tea and chatting. "Professor Rasma, did you arrange everything here?" Professor Flitwick couldn't help but ask. Luo Lin nodded. Hagrid also asked, "But it wasn't like this when I came here last time? It's obvious that there aren't so many things, especially this." As he spoke, he pointed to the bar next to them and the wine on it. "I invite you to come and play at my place. How can I not make preparations? I specially prepared this for you. I wonder if you were satisfied." Luo Lin's words surprised the two of them. They didn't expect that Luo Lin had specially prepared the room for them. Hagrid looked a little flattered. "Professor Rasma, this is too troublesome for you." Professor Flitwick nodded beside him. "Yes, there is no need to go to this point, as long as there is a place for us to play together. Advertisement after all. We have to do better." Luo Lin smiled calmly. "Okay, let's not talk about this. Next, we should drink and play cards together." Mention drinking and playing cards. Hagrid and Professor Flitwick could only stop mentioning what happened before and silently keep it in mind. The two quickly sat on the table. Professor Flitwick was very satisfied with the seat specially arranged for him by Rowling. He felt that Rowling was really a careful and good man, completely different from the rumors. Although he has never used rumors to measure a person, he can now conclude that the rumors are definitely false. Luo Lin is obviously a heartwarming wizard. Hagrid was also very satisfied with the sofa prepared by Luo Lin for him. When he used to play with others, he always felt uncomfortable sitting on it due to his body shape. Today was the most comfortable day for him to sit. With a good mood, Luo Lin went to the bar and got some wine. There is red wine, champagne, fruit wine, and some beers. Let Hagrid and Professor Flitwick take your pick. Professor Flitwick prefers fruit wine. Hagrid chose red wine. When Luo Lin saw the two people's choices, he decided to choose something different, so he chose beer. It doesn't make much difference to him which kind of wine it is. He doesn't like drinking that much, but he doesn't hate it either. That's all. The three of them sat down. Luo Lin started to lead the three of them to play cards. "Next, I'm going to teach you a poker method from the mysterious country in the east, called Dudizu." That's all. Rowling, Hagrid, and Professor Flitwick were playing landlords together. For this asymmetrical poker game, both Hagrid and Professor Flitwick showed great interest. Especially Professor Flitwick. He seems to enjoy the fun of one person playing against two people. Every time he has a chance, he will call the landlord, and it will always be 3 points, regardless of the quality of the cards. So he always loses more than he wins. At the end of the game, Professor Flitwick was the one who lost the most. But Luo Lin was not the big winner. Instead, Hagrid, who seemed to be honest, won the most. Playing cards is naturally not just about playing cards. There is always some bets involved. The first game they played was that whoever lost would drink a glass of wine. Later, Professor Flitwick got drunk. He proposed that whoever loses would have to use magic to draw a mark on his face that would not disappear within a short period of time. Just play games. Advertisement. This punishment is very reasonable. Hagrid and Luo Lin both chose to accept. The result is, Professor Flitwick's face was almost covered in paint. The magic marks one after another made his face look extremely funny. Luo Lin also had several magic marks on his face. Of course he can eliminate them easily, but when playing with friends, you must abide by the rules. There are only 2 long marks on Hagrid's face, one on the left cheek and one on the right cheek. They are very symmetrical and have little impact on his overall image. A long day of gaming is over. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid staggered out of Rowling's dormitory. They were all a little drunk. Rowling chose to send Professor Flitwick to his dormitory first. Professor Flitwick's dormitory was not far from Rowling. After seeing him off, Rowling went to see Hagrid off. He actually drank a lot, but his mind still remained awake. It wasn't until both of them were settled that he returned to the dormitory and fell asleep. This night, he didn't even take a bath or take off his clothes. I slept like this until dawn. When I woke up the next day, Luo Lin only felt that his head was a little dizzy but not painful, which meant that he was not too drunk last night. But when he came to the floor-length mirror and saw the marks on his face, he couldn't help but cover his face. These marks were drawn on his face by Hagrid and Professor Flitwick. Hagrid's drawing is thicker, and Flitwick's drawing is thinner. The thickness and thickness are intertwined, making his face look like a traffic route. Originally, he just had a handsome face with dark circles, but now he looks extremely funny. Luo Lin subconsciously wanted to erase these marks. But I quickly thought of the agreement last night. No one is allowed to remove these marks. They must be allowed to disappear naturally. Feel the residual magic of these marks on your face. Luo Lin wanted to cry but had no tears. These marks will remain on the face for at least a week. This means that when he and Dumbledore go to pick up the skeleton next week, he will still have these marks on his face. With such an image, when walking on the road, wouldn't other people's views of him become more negative? Although he doesn't care that much about other people's negative opinions, he doesn't want others to treat him as a clown, nor does he want to be embarrassed outside. So Rolin decided, for the next period of time, I will stick to my original plan and never go out. Don't let others have a chance to see his face. Advertisement. Chapter 74. Luo Lin is very dissatisfied with his current image. But thinking that there were many more marks on Professor Flitwick's face than on his own, he felt much more balanced. Hagrid was okay, with only 2 marks on his face. I don't know if it's because he's lucky or because he has better poker skills. Luo Lin felt that he did not dare to go out. Professor Flitwick most likely didn't dare to go out. So for the next period of time, he figured he would have to stay in the dormitory. He even considered going to Hogsmeade with Dumbledore to get the skeleton, and wanted Black to notify Dumbledore and postpone it for a while. He really didn't want to go out and let others see what he looked like now. I will not go to the auditorium for meals during the next period of time. He planned to use the quick meals and snacks in the storage space to survive this period. However, Luo Lin made up his mind. The development of things was completely different from what he imagined. He had just eaten some bread and drank some milk for breakfast. There was a knock on his own door. Open the door and take a look. Rowling discovered that it was Professor Flitwick and Hagrid. Why are you here? Seeing Professor Flitwick's face that was about to be painted into facial makeup, he felt a little guilty. Could Professor Flitwick be here to cause trouble for him? But he reacted quickly. It was Professor Flitwick who proposed painting something on his face yesterday. Really looking for trouble. He should be looking for trouble with Professor Flitwick himself. Why would Professor Flitwick come to cause trouble for him? Then why did Professor Flitwick and Hagrid come to see him? Do you still want to continue playing poker? Luo Lin couldn't help but think. Then his idea was confirmed. Hagrid looked at Luo Lin with an innocent face. Professor Rasma, didn't you say that I can come and play with you in my free time? Professor Flitwick nodded. Hagrid told me so. Do you have something to do? Then we can leave first. Did they really come to play poker with me? Luo Lin felt something strange in his heart. Could it be that these 2 people didn't care about the marks on their faces? Forget it about Hagrid. Do you want to continue playing with Professor Flitwick like this? He planned to ask clearly, I have nothing to do, and you are welcome to come and play at my place. But Professor Flitwick, are these things on your face okay? Professor Flitwick understood and smiled heartily. What's the problem with this? It's just that the face becomes a little strange. Advertisement. When I went to the auditorium for dinner today, Professor Dumbledore thought the things painted on my face were very artistic. Luo Lin twitched the corner of his mouth. Artistry? Why didn't he see it? Isn't this just a random drawing, with different thicknesses and no sense of beauty? Is Dumbledore trying to fool Professor Flitwick? Most likely. I was embarrassed to say that Professor Flitwick had a bad image, so I reluctantly praised his artistry. Luo Lin has already figured out the general situation. But since Professor Flitwick didn't care, he didn't seem to have anything to care about. It was just Professor Flitwick who came to his place to play poker. And he looked at Hagrid, who had only 2 marks on his face. Luo Lin had darker thoughts in his mind. How could Hagrid be allowed to get away with it? Oh no, stay out of it. Hagrid's face should be the same as his and Professor Flitwick's, looking like a colorful person. Although it is inappropriate to have this idea of making friends bad, Luo Lin feels that friends should share weal and woe. How could Hagrid not bear what he and Professor Flitwick had to bear? Think of this. Luo Lin smiled and nodded. Dumbledore really has an artistic vision, and I also think the marks on your face, Professor, are very artistic. Hear the conversation between the two. Hagrid couldn't help scratching his head. Is it really artistic? He looked carefully at the faces of Rowling and Professor Flitwick. I don't think there's anything artistic about it. It looks a bit messy, but I guess it's because I don't have any artistic talent and can't see the artistry in it. After all, Dumbledore said so. Hagrid was very convinced of Dumbledore. Dumbledore said that if there is artistry, then there must be artistry, and he did not question it at all. At this moment, he suddenly felt a little envious of Rowling and Professor Flitwick. If I had known that I would have lost more yesterday, I might have been praised by Dumbledore for his artistry. Luo Lin didn't know Hagrid's strange thoughts. He had now invited Hagrid and Professor Flitwick into the room. The dormitory was in a mess yesterday. At this time, it had been cleaned up by Black and Longbottom. The items are also arranged. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid were not polite and sat in their seats skillfully. Luo Lin took out some more wine from the space and added it to the bar. Then they started playing cards again. It's still landlord. Professor Flitwick was a little less persistent today. Advertisement: he would only choose to rob the landlord when his cards were good. But I don't know if it's due to luck or card skills. He is still the one who loses the most. Luo Lin can accept this. What Luo Lin couldn't accept was that Hagrid was the one who paid the least. And Hagrid was simply incredible today. There was only 1 mark added to the face. Drawing it in the middle, his face changed from 2 vertical lines to 3 vertical lines, which is a chuan. Compared to yesterday, Luo Lin's face had more than a dozen marks. His current face. Professor Flitwick's face looked almost the same as yesterday. This made Luo Lin feel even more uncomfortable. Stealing the chicken will lose the rice. The marks on Hagrid's face didn't increase, but he got more and more. How could he go out like this? What he didn't know was, Hagrid was also disappointed at this time. He clearly planned to let Rowling and Professor Flitwick draw more lines on his face today. As a result, when I drank too much, I didn't care about anything. In the end, there was only 1 more line, which seemed to have no artistic quality at first glance. Professor Flitwick wasn't too happy either. He originally thought that he was too high-spirited yesterday, which is why he lost so much. But today he found out that he was just a simple dish, which made him feel even more uncomfortable. As a result, when the show ended, all 3 of them were dejected. I didn't drink too much today. Luo Lin did not send the 2 of them off. After taking a bath, he went to bed early. It was approaching noon the next day. The door was knocked again. Luo Lin opened the door excitedly. In the morning, he studied landlords carefully and prepared to avenge his shame in the next card game. However, when he saw the person outside the door, he was stunned. There was indeed Hagrid and Professor Flitwick outside the door. But there is another person. This person was also the reason why Luo Lin was dumbfounded. Dumbledore. Professor Dumbledore? Why are you here? Luo Lin couldn't help but ask. Then the answer he got made Luo Lin dumbfounded. Let me explore the origin of the art on Professor Flitwick's face. Co-author, Professor. Are you serious? Advertisement. Chapter 75. Hear Dumbledore's words. Luo Lin was completely confused. What's going on? Professor. Co-author. Were you sincere in everything you said to Professor Flitwick? Not a courtesy? The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Professor Dumbledore. So you are actually here to play poker too? Dumbledore smiled and nodded. You can understand that. Dumbledore volunteered to join the poker game. Luo Lin suddenly felt that he had not woken up. Would Dumbledore still like this kind of thing? Or was he really just admiring the graffiti on Professor Flitwick's face, and then wanted to graffiti himself too? Rowling was a little confused about Dumbledore's thoughts. But come, he sighed in his heart. but a warm smile appeared on his face. "Welcome." Rowling welcomed the three Dumbledores into the dormitory. Dumbledore glanced around, a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. He also didn't expect Luo Lin to decorate the dormitory like this. Is this still a dormitory? This is obviously a club used for gatherings. As expected of a young man, there are just so many ideas. Dumbledore didn't think there was anything wrong with Luo Lin's arrangement, but he made a little inquiry. "Luo Lin, where are the previous things in this dormitory?" Luo Lin was stunned for a moment, then came to his senses. When he was setting up the dormitory before, he originally planned to ask Dumbledore if the things in the dormitory could be thrown away. "Then I forgot about it all of a sudden. Those things are still there, Professor. Do you want me to hand them over to you? Or do you want the dormitory to be restored to its original state?" Rowling didn't think Dumbledore would ask for the dormitories to be restored to their original state. He just asked. After all, judging from Dumbledore's expression, Dumbledore quite liked this place. Sure enough, Dumbledore waved his hand. "No, it's fine as long as the things are still there. What I want is that if you want to change dormitories in the future, you can put those things in their original places. After all, those things have been in Hogwarts for many years, and some of them commemorative, meaning." Luo Lin suddenly realized, "I understand. When I move out of this dormitory, I will restore it to its original state, making sure it is exactly the same as before. That's not necessary, it just needs to be roughly the same. They are some old antiques and don't have much use," Dumbledore said as he walked inside. Rowling brought Dumbledore and others into the room. Advertisement. Then I discovered an embarrassing problem. What he prepared was a triangular table. As a result, Dumbledore came. So the triangular table was somewhat useless. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid are also aware of this problem. The two met Dumbledore in the Great Hall. Dumbledore discovered that Professor Flitwick had many more marks on his face. He asked curiously and learned that they were playing poker at Luo Lin's place, so he offered to follow him. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid naturally would not refuse, but none of them considered the table. Dumbledore also saw the table at this time and was a little surprised. "Is this the only table like this? It seems that my uninvited visit is a bit rude." It sounds like he wants to leave. Luo Lin stopped him at this time. "Dumbledore seems to want to have fun. This is his boss. Can you not let him have all the fun?" Luo Lin waved his hand. The three-legged table in front of him disappeared instantly. Dumbledore had seen Rowling use the storage space. However, he still looked surprised at this time. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid had been surprised in the past 2 days, when they ran out of wine. You can see the scene of Luo Lin taking out the wine from the storage space. See Luo Lin retracting the table in and out of the space. They immediately thought that Luo Lin might bring out a new table next, and there was some expectation in their eyes. Luo Lin also lived up to their expectations. After asking everyone to retreat a little, Black and Longbottom were asked to move a few chairs away, leaving a blank area. Then he waved his hand. A square table appeared in everyone's sight. This is a medium-sized table. Pure wood products. There are many patterns on it. It was a Chinese-style wooden table that Luo Lin found on his trip to London this time. It can be said to be an antique. Saw this wooden table. Dumbledore showed a look of amazement. "This table is like a work of art. To be precise, this is a work of art," Luo Lin said with a smile. After all, antiques certainly count as works of art. With this square wooden table, Dumbledore also had a seat. Luo Lin deliberately took out another Taisher chair and a cushion from the exit space. This was the position he had prepared for Dumbledore. Advertisement. Dumbledore looked like he was seeing the Grand Master's chair for the first time. He first circled the Taisher chair twice before slowly sitting down. When he put his hands on the armrests, he smiled sincerely. "This chair is really nice, especially the backrest and armrests. It's much more comfortable to sit on than the chair in my office." Professor Flitwick and Hagrid also looked interested. However, one of them is too big and the other is too small, so it is not easy to sit on them. Everyone chatted for a while. Professor Flitwick eagerly suggested that they start playing cards. At this time, another problem was encountered. You can play landlords with 3 people. What do we play when there are 4 of us? Hagrid and Professor Flitwick both turned their attention to Rowling. The rules of landlords were taught by Luo Lin. They felt that Rolin must have other rules for how to play poker. In fact, Rolin does. Things like upgrading, running faster, and even 4-player landlords can be played. But Luo Lin prefers a more confrontational gameplay. So Luo Lin chose the scoring method, which was the popular Poker King in his hometown in his previous life. The so-called scorekeeping. Just 2 decks of playing cards are needed for 4 people to play. In a deck of cards, for 5s, Each one counts as 5 points. 4 tens and 4 kings, each counts as 10 points. That adds up to 100 points. 2 decks of cards equals 200 points. Then use suits and numbers to match. Work in pairs and compete. It mainly depends on who has more points in the end, but there are also some other winning and losing rules. This is a poker game that is very suitable for two-sided confrontation. Luo Lin took out 2 new decks of cards. Start explaining the rules to Dumbledore and the other 3. Of course, it is still difficult to understand directly just by talking about it. It needs to be explained and played at the same time. After playing a few games, you will naturally master the rules. Professor Flitwick and Hagrid were still very interested in this confrontation, but this time it's a symmetrical confrontation. Dumbledore also seemed to like this kind of gameplay. After getting familiar with the gameplay, he was the first to propose the punishment rules. Just like landlords, whoever loses will have a magic mark on their face, which cannot be removed. Advertisement.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.